Chapter 917. After swearing the divine secret oath, Wuxia proved his innocence. He turned around and stared at Shin Kitten. "It's your turn." Shin Kitten felt a headache coming on. She also swore the divine secret oath. After a while, the two of them looked at each other. They were both sure that they were not spies of the Haotian alliance. They just had some contact with Lu Yi for some reason. Wuxia's face was cold. "I don't care what kind of contact you have with that person. But since you call me senior brother, I have to advise you not to contact him in any way. If you get involved with that person, you won't have a good ending." He looked like an experienced person who had been poisoned. This made Shin Kitten even more curious. "What happened between you and him?" "Don't ask. I don't want to say. That's all I have to say. You're on your own. Please." He was going to ask her to leave. Shin Kitten sighed. She could only say slowly, "Eternal jade blood. Elixir heart for 10,000 years. Wuxia said subconsciously. In the room, the two of them looked at each other. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. "Senior brothering this thing." Shin Kitten broke the awkward silence. "Give it to me." Wuxia reached out his hand as if he had accepted his fate. That guy Lu Ye was clearly warning him. The attack and defense of Lonely Mountain City last time was his sore point. He couldn't easily tell others about it. That guy's attitude was already very obvious. If he dared to refuse, he would definitely leak the matter to the Wanmo Ridge. Then his life would not be easy. No matter what, the Wanmo Ridge suffered a lot in that battle. After receiving the voice transmission stone, Wuxia's hand trembled as if it was scalded. Only then did he look at Shin Kitten seriously. "You'd better forget about what happened today. Also remember my advice. Don't contact that person in any way in the future. Otherwise what?" Shin Kitten looked at him curiously. Wuxia's interest waned. He waved his hand and had no desire to speak. What else could he do? He would end up like that. Shin Kitten left. He didn't know if she had listened to his warning. Holding the voice transmission stone in his hand, Wuxia's expression changed. He thought that as long as he hid in Lonely Mountain City, Lu Ye wouldn't be able to get involved with him. Who knew that he had such a method to ask someone to pass a voice transmission stone to him? After sitting for a long time, Wuxia gritted his teeth, poured his spirit energy into the sound transmission stone, and asked through gritted teeth, "What are you doing?" Outside Ash Flame Mountain Pass, Lu Yi, who was patrolling the area with Yi and Hupa, suddenly had a thought. She took out another sound transmission stone and secretly sighed at how efficient Shun Little Cat was. They had only been apart for half a day, and the item was already in Wuxia's hands. He really didn't trust the wrong person. 2 days later, 300 li northeast of Lonely Mountain City. And don't be late. When Wuxia wanted to contact Lu Yi again, he found that the resonance of the voice transmission stone in his hand had disappeared. In other words, the other voice transmission stone had been put into Lu Ye's storage bag. Die! Venting his anger, Wuxia roared at the voice transmission stone and stood up with an ashen face. Lu Ye, that bastard, was going too far. He inexplicably gave him a time and a place. Did he really think that Wuxia would be so easily bullied? "I won't go this time. What can you do to me?" Inside Lonely Mountain, after Lu Yi contacted Wuxia, he went to Thought Moon Immortal's bamboo house. As for Wuxia's reaction, it was easy to guess. He wasn't worried that Wuxia wouldn't go. He now had something on Wuxia. If Wuxia didn't go, he would immediately go to Lonely Mountain City in the same disguise as last time and take off his mask in front of all the cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge. At that time, Wuxia would be in trouble. "Sir, this humble servant has something to report." Lu Yi bowed at the foot of the bamboo house. "What is it?" Thought Moon Immortal's voice came from behind. Lu Yi turned his head and saw Thought Moon Immortal sitting on a tree trunk, looking down at him. The corners of his eyes twitched. He realized that this mountain pass master didn't live in the bamboo house most of the time. Perhaps she was used to living in the open for so many years, and would often appear on the trunk of a large tree. "Sir, this humble servant has found a guide to Li Plains. Perhaps he will be of some use." "A guide?" Thought Moon Immortal didn't understand. "The journey to Li Plains is not short. Even if Sir has the means to conceal himself, we are going deep into the heart of Myriad Demon Ridge. There is a great risk of being exposed. But what if we have someone from Myriad Demon Ridge accompanying us? If we are interrogated, let him deal with it. Sir and I will be able to easily slip through. Thought Moon Immortal immediately understood what he meant. Originally, if she wanted to take Lu Yi to Li Plains, it would be impossible to fly there openly. This was because Li Plains was on the border between the War Province and the Cloud Province. As a famous divine sea cultivator, if she really flew there, her whereabouts would be easily exposed. Therefore, if she really wanted to go to Li Plains, she could only rely on the ability of a ghost cultivator to sneak there. But in this way, her speed would not be fast. But if she really did as Lu Yi said and found a cultivator from Myriad Demon Ridge to accompany them, things would be much easier if they were interrogated and let the other party deal with it. At the very least, she could fly there openly without worrying too much. But, you can find such a person? I already have a candidate and have an agreement with him. Thought Moon Immortal was surprised. She didn't know that Lu Yi had such an ability. Is he a trustworthy person? Thought Moon Immortal asked worriedly. No, but I have some information on him. I don't think he will dare to have any bad intentions. That's good. But you still have to be careful. When the time comes, I will handle everything. Sir, you only need to lead the way. You don't have to communicate with him. This way it would be convenient for Thought Moon Immortal to hide. Thought Moon Immortal nodded. Even so, there's still a problem. Although I can wear a mask to hide my appearance, it's not easy to hide my cultivation. The person you are looking for might be able to detect my identity because of this. You don't have to worry about that. Sir, please move. Lu Yi gestured with his hand. Thought Moon Immortal understood and lightly floated down from the tree trunk. Lu Yi raised his hand and stepped forward. Excuse me. Under Thought Moon Immortal's surprised gaze, he pressed a hand on her lower abdomen. In the next instant, spiritual energy surged. Thought Moon Immortal clearly sensed that there was an additional spirit pattern on her body. After seeing Lu Yi use the Rainbow Phoenix's flight together, Thought Moon Immortal couldn't help but be curious about the use of this spirit pattern. What is this? Imitation of power. Lu Yi explained. Do you still remember when Yi and Hupa came from afar with the pressure of a spirit sea realm cultivator and scared off Wanzhonggang and the others? That is the effect of this spirit pattern. This spirit pattern can not only simulate the pressure of someone with a higher cultivation, but also the spiritual energy fluctuations of someone with a lower cultivation. Sir, you can try it out, but please be careful when you push your spiritual energy. After all, this is a spirit pattern I added to your body. If the spiritual energy fluctuations are too great, there is a possibility that the spirit pattern will fail. At that time, Sir's true cultivation will be exposed. Thought Moon Immortal understood and tried to stimulate the effect of the spirit pattern. The aura on her body began to change constantly. As a spirit sea realm cultivator, she quickly figured out the mysteries of the spirit pattern. A moment later, the spiritual energy fluctuations on her body stopped at the level of a first-order true lake realm cultivator, even lower than Lu Ye's current level. This was already the limit. It would be impossible for her to go any lower. With a push of her spiritual energy, she dispersed the spirit pattern. Thought Moon Immortal smiled at Lu Yi. You are very thorough. I'll do as you say. This smile made the world lose its color. It was also the first time Lu Yi saw Thought Moon Immortal smile. His gaze lingered on her face for a moment before he looked away. As long as Sir is satisfied. If there are no other instructions, this humble one will take his leave. Go. Looking at Lu Ye's departing back, Thought Moon Immortal's long-lost figure once again appeared in her mind. In the end, they were not the same. That person did things as he pleased, but Lu Yi had a feeling of planning before taking action. She raised her hand and touched the place on her lower abdomen where she had just been touched. Thought Moon Immortal had a complicated look on her face. Speaking of which, in all these years, no one had ever done such a rude thing to her. If it had been someone else, she would have slapped them. How could a woman's lower abdomen be touched so casually? Even if it was through her clothes, it was still not allowed. But the two of them had already done some intimate things before. During the battle against Wanzhonggang, their fingers were still interlocked. Touching her lower abdomen didn't seem to be a big deal. In the future, there would definitely be times when she needed to borrow strength. In these 2 days, Lu Yi did not cultivate. Instead, he spent most of his time imprinting the origin of the dragon soaring realm. Occasionally, he would enter the Mirage realm to hone his blade skills. 2 days later, Lu Yi had just walked out of the bamboo building, when Thought Moon Immortal appeared in front of him. They looked at each other and Thought Moon Immortal nodded slightly. She urged her spiritual energy to wrap around Lu Yi and soared into the sky. Sir, if we leave like this, there will be no one left to guard the mountain pass. Is it okay? Lu Yi asked. If Wanemo Ridge wants Ashen Flame Mountain Pass, just take it. White Jade City and Clear Moon Cave can't wait for Wanemo Ridge to take action. This way they will have a reason to send troops. White Jade City Pass and Clear Moon Cave Pass were the left and right neighbors of Ashen Flame Mountain Pass. The former, like Ashen Flame Mountain Pass, belonged to Great Moon Pass, while the latter belonged to Small Moon Pass. Lu Yi had previously received a task to buy wine, and had even made a trip to White Jade City Pass. However, he had come and gone in a hurry and did not have the chance to experience the local customs there. Over the years, the front line where the 3 major mountain passes were located did not have a fierce battle. The cultivators of White Jade City Pass and Clear Moon Cave Pass did not have the opportunity to gain military merits. Therefore, if Lonely Mountain City really dared to take action, the cultivators of these 2 major mountain passes would definitely be overjoyed. Chapter 9:18. Speaking of which, before Lu Yi came to Ashen Flame Mountain Pass, there would often be no one guarding it. Because Thought Moon Immortal couldn't stay here forever. She would go to Lonely Mountain City every few days, and at that time Ashen Flame Mountain Pass was also empty. So no matter what, the possibility of Ashen Flame Mountain Pass being captured was not high, unless Myriad Demon Ridge was preparing to launch a large-scale attack. Lu Yi hurried along. Half an hour later, Lu Yi focused his vision and looked ahead. Sir, we're almost there. I'll contact that person later. Sir doesn't need to say anything. Good. Thought Moon Immortal nodded and flew down. Lu Yi left a pseudo-prestige spirit inscription on her body to conceal her spirit sea realm aura. Sir, do you have the face to agree? Lu Yi asked. Aura could be concealed with pseudo-prestige, but appearance could only be concealed with a face mask. Of course, it would be better if Thought Moon Immortal had a treasure that could disguise her appearance. I do. Thought Moon Immortal nodded. How could one not have a face mask when traveling outside? It was a must-have for sneaking around. In the Heavenly Secret Treasure House and Heavenly Secret Yin, the best-selling items were spirit pills and spirit artifacts. In addition, the sales of face masks were also high all year round. Then Sir will act according to the circumstances. Lu Yi instructed before turning around and heading to the agreed-upon location. After Lu Yi left, Thought Moon Immortal flipped her palm and a face mask that looked quite old appeared on her hand. Looking at this face mask, some distant memories inevitably appeared in her mind. She had once worn this face mask and done many things that no one knew about. As if recalling something interesting, the corners of Thought Moon Immortal's mouth curled up slightly. 300 kilometers northeast of Lonely Mountain City. Lu Yi, who was wearing a face mask, appeared here without any intention of deliberately hiding his whereabouts. However, in terms of cultivation, he revealed that he was only a first-order True Lake Realm cultivator. Obviously, he had also activated the pseudo-prestige spirit inscription. Although this spirit inscription couldn't provide any help in battle, it had one advantage, which was that it didn't consume much spirit chi to maintain it. Lu Yi only disguised his cultivation from third order to first order, so the cost of maintaining this spirit inscription was nothing to him. The main reason was that breaking through 2 minor realms in such a short period of time was a bit too shocking. In order to avoid scaring Ying Wu Ji, it was best to restrain himself a bit. The terrain of this place was a forest, and it was not dense. Lu Yi flashed and stood on the crown of a large tree. His gaze swept around, but he did not find Ying Wu Ji's figure. In such a situation, either Ying Wu Ji didn't come or he came and hid. Lu Yi felt that it was most likely the latter. He stealthily activated his divine sense and scanned his surroundings. However, he did not discover anything. He wasn't in a hurry, so he just stood there and waited. If Ying Wu Ji really came, then he must have discovered him. Sure enough, after about the time it would take to make a cup of tea, When Lu Yi once again used his divine sense to investigate, he found that there was a new life force about 1,000 meters away from him. Wuji had suffered a big loss under Lu Ye's hands before, so he knew that Lu Ye's perception was much stronger compared to ordinary cultivators. As such, he did not dare to get too close to Lu Yi. In his opinion, a distance of 1,000 feet was already very safe. There was no way that Lu Ye could discover him. He did not even dare to look at Lu Ye's location, lest his gaze arouse Lu Ye's vigilance, so he just lay there quietly. He had thought of completely ignoring Lu Yi because he knew that no matter what Lu Yi wanted to do, nothing good would come out of it. However, he was also afraid that Lu Yi would run to Lonely Mountain City and spread rumors. If that happened, he would not be able to clear his name. It was with such complicated feelings that he rushed here at the appointed time. He had already made up his mind that no matter what Lu Yi wanted him to do, he would decisively refuse and draw a clear line between them, never coming into contact with him again. After making up his mind, Wuji immediately relaxed. However, he suddenly saw Lu Ye's figure move, flying towards him, and then he landed 10 meters away from him, his gaze fixed in his direction. Exposed? Impossible. Wuji's heart was in turmoil. Although he did not want to admit it, the place Lu Yi was looking at was indeed where he was hiding. How could he have been exposed? He had not been exposed. This was just a coincidence. Just as he was thinking this, Lu Yi suddenly said, "Let's go." After 3 breaths, Wuji undid his concealment and revealed himself, saying decisively, "Lu Yi, I'm not here to promise you anything. I'm just here to tell you something. You won't have to do anything difficult on this trip. This is for you. You might need it in the future." "What is it?" Wuji took it and asked subconsciously, but he quickly reacted, "I'm talking to you. Did you hear me? 3 drops of soul-cleansing water." Wuji instantly fell silent, almost suspecting that he had misheard. After meeting Lu Ye's serious gaze and confirming that he had not misheard, he hurriedly opened the jade bottle Lu Yi had just given him and carefully examined it. His face was filled with shock. It really was soul-cleansing water. Although he had never seen real soul-cleansing water, he had at least heard of this divine item from his elders. He had heard all kinds of rumors, and the item in his hand was perfectly matched. "Take it as your reward for this trip," Lu Yi added. Just as he said to Qian Wudong, "If you want a horse to run, you have to feed it." He could easily guess what kind of attitude Wuji had towards him. If he wanted Wuji to sincerely work for him, a simple threat would be meaningless. A stick and a date would be the best strategy. He could give Shun Kitten 3 drops of soul-cleansing water. So what was Wuji worth? After a moment of silence, Wuji had already made a decision. He put away the soul-cleansing water in the jade bottle and waved to Lu Yi. "Let's go." There was Shen Kitten before, and now there was Wuji. Soul-cleansing water was indeed a treasure to buy people's hearts. Lu Yi, however, stood still. "Is there anything else?" Wuji asked, puzzled. "Don't you need to take a leave?" Lu Yi asked. Wuji's expression was embarrassed. "I've already taken a leave, but let me make it clear to you first. This time I don't care what you do, but if you cross my bottom line, I will withdraw at any time. Also, I'm not helping you this time because of the soul-cleansing water. No matter what, you saved my life on the unparalleled continent more than once. Although I, Wuji, am a ghost cultivator, I am a person who knows how to repay kindness." He spoke with a strong sense of righteousness. Lu Yi couldn't help but nod. Then he raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint. With a flick of his finger, a dot of blue light floated in Wuji's direction. Wuji immediately covered his battlefield imprint vigilantly. "What do you want to do?" "Add an imprint so that you can continue to repay kindness in the future." Wuji's expression turned bitter. Previously, the two of them didn't add each other's imprint, so when Lu Yi wanted to find him, he had to let Shen Kitten be the middleman to pass the message. But if he added an imprint, then Lu Yi could find him anytime and anywhere in the future. This kind of thing. Wuji was about to refuse when he saw Lu Ye's fingers rubbing the hilt of his sword. "This guy wants to stab me again." Since he was inferior, Wuji could only let go of the back of his hand and let the dot of blue light float into his battlefield imprint. Lu Yi tried to send a message to Wuji. After confirming that the imprint was successfully added, He called out, "Let's go." Ing Wuji followed with heavy steps. A moment later, Ing Wuji, who was following beside Lu Yi, looked ahead and saw Thought Moon Immortal wearing a mask. He couldn't help but frown. Why is there someone else? Who is she? Following Lu Yi wasn't something to be proud of. Possible he didn't want a third person to know. Who would have thought that there was someone else waiting here? And it was a female cultivator. This question stumped Lu Yi. He hadn't thought about how to address Thought Moon Immortal in front of Ing Wuji, or how to introduce the relationship between the two. Just as he was about to warn Ing Wuji not to ask what he shouldn't ask, Thought Moon Immortal had already taken the initiative to greet him. She called out crisply, "Senior apprentice brother." Lu Ye's body swayed, and he almost fell from the sky. Ing Wuji quickly caught him. He was puzzled. "What's wrong with you?" "There's been some hiccups in my cultivation recently," Lu Yi explained. "Senior apprentice brother?" He didn't expect Thought Moon Immortal to address him like that. And that tone, it wasn't the tone that Thought Moon Immortal should have. After so many days in Ash Flame Mountain Pass, his impression of Thought Moon Immortal had always been cold as ice and a woman of few words. She shouldn't be calling someone senior apprentice brother in such a crisp, sweet, and lively manner. When she got closer, her fragrance assailed his nostrils. Thought Moon Immortal's gaze swept past Ing Wuji. She said, "Senior apprentice brother, this is the powerful friend you mentioned. As expected, his temperament is extraordinary." "Oh, that's him." Lu Yi was extremely uncomfortable. If he hadn't been sure that Thought Moon Immortal would be waiting for him here, he would have doubted whether this person before him was really Thought Moon Immortal. Not only did her tone turn devilishly sweet, but Lu Yi could also see the curved eyes under Thought Moon Immortal's mask. She was even smiling as she spoke. Ing Wuji was flattered. He didn't expect Lu Yi to think of him like this behind his back. He immediately straightened his chest, cupped his fists and said, "Ing Wuji." Although he couldn't see the appearance of the woman before him, just from her voice and figure, she was definitely a rare beauty. The praise of a beauty always made people happy. Some of his dissatisfaction with Lu Yi also dissipated instantly. However, this woman looked very intimate with Lu Yi. Their relationship should be quite close. She might even be Lu Yi's woman, the so-called friend's wife. Also, he and Lu Yi didn't seem to have reached the level of friends. But no matter what, he didn't have any inappropriate thoughts about the woman before him. After all, she was from Grand Heaven Alliance. "Greetings, Senior Apprentice Brother Ing." Thought Moon Immortal bowed. "Senior Apprentice Brother Ing. Just call me Water Immortal." "Junior Apprentice Sister Water Immortal. You really live up to your name." He turned to look at Lu Yi. "Lu, brother, you're really lucky." Lu Yi forced a smile that was uglier than crying. He. Chapter 919. "Lu Yi, you have to disguise yourself a little. After all, your appearance is famous here. It's best if you pretend to be Fierce Bull." Ing Wuji reminded. Nian Yuxian couldn't help but be suspicious. "Fierce Bull." Lu Yi explained, "I have another identity." Nian Yu Immortal understood and smiled. Who didn't have another identity outside? Just like her name Nian Yuxian, Lu Yi also had a time when he would turn into Fierce Bull. Following the advice, he put away the Pan Mountain saber. However, with the Scarlet Dragon battle robe and Lu Yi's figure, he didn't look like a spell cultivator, but it was fine. Not all spell cultivators in the 9 provinces had large sleeves and wide robes. There were always some who wore clothes similar to the Scarlet Dragon battle robe. There wasn't much to prepare. Ing Wuji asked, "Where are we going?" He had already thought it through. Since he couldn't resist, he could only cooperate. Moreover, he had already obtained 3 drops of soul-cleansing water. Li Plains. Lu Yi reported the destination. Ing Wuji frowned. "That's not near." He was secretly surprised. These two were too bold. They actually wanted to go deep into Li Plains. No wonder they needed to rope him in. Clearly, they wanted to use his identity as a Wanmo rich cultivator to clear the obstacles on their way. The Li Plains was vast and boundless, but because the environment wasn't very good, there weren't any sects from the Myriad Devil Ridge that had established themselves there. From the looks of it, Lu Yi wasn't going to cause trouble for anyone. This made things much easier. "Then let's go. But first you two have to listen to my instructions. Don't do anything extreme." Otherwise, I'll risk my life to leak your information. Don't worry, we should be the ones worrying. Wuji thought about it and agreed. He took out his flying spirit artifact and landed on it. Lu Yi also took out his spirit artifact. However, before he could fly up, Nian Yuxian had already sat on it. Lu Yi was startled. Considering that Nian Yuxian wasn't in a good condition to use her spirit energy, he let her be. After a while, the two spirit artifacts turned into streams of light and soared into the sky, flying straight in the direction of Li Plains. After traveling for a few hundred miles, they were already considered to have entered the sphere of influence of Wanmo Ridge. Soon they encountered a patrol team from Wanmo Ridge. I'll talk to the patrol of Lonely Mountain City. Don't do anything rash. Wuji said in a low voice and stepped forward. Lu Yi controlled the spirit boat to stop where it was, his fingers gently stroking the boat. Seated in front of him, Thought Moon Immortal's beautiful eyes were also staring at Wuji's back. The moment she sensed that something was wrong, she would strike like lightning. Not far ahead, Wuji exchanged a few words with the patrol team, and the patrol team left. Let's go, Wuji said. Lu Yi steered the spirit boat to follow. Continue forward. Along the way, they occasionally encountered teams patrolling the nearby passes, but Wuji was there to take care of them. Their journey was smooth. This guide is rather reliable. Senior apprentice brother, do you have any information on him? Thought Moon Immortal turned to look at Lu Yi. Because she was sitting and Lu Yi was standing, Thought Moon Immortal's body was tilted and her head was raised. Coupled with her crisp words, she looked rather cute and playful. Lu Yi, on the other hand, felt a prickling sensation on his back. He said in a low voice, "My lord, what's wrong with this woman? Why does it feel like she's a completely different person when she's wearing a mask? What are you talking about?" The guide this time is Senior Apprentice Brother Fiercebull. I am Junior Apprentice Sister Water Immortal. Under the mask, Thought Moon Immortal glared at Lu Yi. Extremely charming. If you say so, then so be it. Lu Yi was helpless. Wuji was so cooperative. Firstly, it was because of the 3 drops of soul-cleansing water. Secondly, as he said, Lu Yi had saved his life twice in the Wushuang continent. Wuji came from a top sect after all. How could he be an ungrateful person? But strictly speaking, he judged that Lu Yi probably wouldn't do anything to harm the Myriad Devil Ridge. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so cooperative. After passing through a few checkpoints, the number of Myriad Devil Ridge patrol teams decreased. After all, they were already deep into the Myriad Devil Ridge's territory in the War Province. As night fell, the 3 of them found a place to rest. Wuji started a fire and roasted the beast meat. Lu Yi set up an alert and defensive array nearby. When he returned, he found that Thought Moon Immortal had already started eating. Because it wasn't convenient to take off the mask, she only lifted it slightly when eating. But the speed of eating was not slow at all. Furthermore, he didn't know what Wuji had said to her, but she was actually laughing non-stop. When Lu Yi saw this scene, he couldn't help but be on tenterhooks for Wuji. He was afraid that he would say something he shouldn't and be killed by Thought Moon Immortal. Senior Martial Brother, here you go. Thought Moon Immortal handed a piece of roasted beast meat to Lu Yi. Although he had heard her call him Senior Martial Brother many times along the way, and told him to get used to her disguise, Lu Yi still stiffened when he took the meat. Senior Martial Brother, so many interesting things have happened between the 2 of you. Why haven't I heard you mention it before? Wuji said angrily, how is it interesting? It's obvious that he's been bullying me. Then why didn't you resist? Thought Moon Immortal tilted her head and looked at Wuji innocently. Wuji looked embarrassed. I can't beat him. Thought Moon Immortal patted Wuji's shoulder and said earnestly, then you have to cultivate well. Try to defeat my Senior Martial Brother as soon as possible and vent your grievances. Wuji was very touched. He finally met someone who understood his difficulties, and it was a female cultivator. Damn it, why does Lu Ye get all the good things in the world? Why don't I have such an understanding junior martial sister? At night, the 2 of them took turns keeping watch. They would continue their journey at dawn. With 10,000 Demon Ridge's guidance and Wuji, a core disciple of the Sanluo Hall in the War Province, the journey was peaceful. Occasionally, they would encounter 1 or 2 Wanmo Ridge cultivators flying around, but Wuji would deal with them. This method was much more efficient and safer than Thought Moon Immortal's original plan of sneaking in with Lu Yi. Time flew by, and 3 days later, a vast plain appeared in their field of vision. They had arrived at Li Plains. The entire Li Plains was extremely large. However, because it was barren and had no minerals or other cultivation resources, no sect had been established here since ancient times. From the 10,000 Demon Ridges map, the area occupied by Li Plains was almost 10% of the Wanmo Ridges territory in the War Province. The wind blew and the grass fell. The three of them jumped and looked ahead. The atmosphere was inexplicably heavy. Wuxia said, "I'm guessing that you won't allow me to leave now. Keep up." Lu Yi could not be bothered to talk nonsense with him. She steered the spirit boat forward. Wuxia sighed and could only accept his fate. Although he had arrived at Li Plains, he also knew that Lu Ye would not let him go so easily. He also did not know what Lu Ye and his junior sister wanted to do, but if he let him go at this time, there would be the risk of information being leaked. Moreover, they might encounter more Wanmo Ridge cultivators on the road ahead. At that time, there would be trouble for him to deal with. As they continued forward, Lu Yi soon discovered some abnormalities below. She frowned and said, "There was a great battle here." Along the way, there were many traces of a great battle. Moreover, those traces seemed to have been left behind for quite some time. The traces of a great battle covered an extremely large area. If there really was a great battle here, it definitely would not have been a small one. "I've never heard of the Great Battle of Li Plains 38 years ago." Wuxia glanced curiously at Lu Yi, as if wondering why he had never heard of it. Lu Yi shook his head. "That shouldn't be the case. You're a disciple of the Blue Blood sect, so how could you not know? What does that have to do with whether or not I'm a disciple of the Blue Blood sect?" Lu Yi frowned, faintly having some guesses. "Because the Plains of Li is the burial place of your famous eldest senior brother." Back then, millions of cultivators from the two great factions fought a bitter battle here. Wuxia spoke tirelessly. Lu Yi listened quietly, looking down at Thought Moon Immortal sitting in front of him. No wonder Thought Moon Immortal had been so quiet ever since they entered Li Plains. "You should know that the War Province originally fell completely under the control of your Grand Heaven Alliance, but after the Great Battle of Li Plains, half of the War Province fell into the hands of the 10,000 Devil Ridge. If it weren't for your Grand Heaven Alliance establishing a defensive line in time, the entire War Province would have fallen under the control of the Myriad Devil Ridge. Your Grand Heaven Alliance would have nothing to do with it." This was the first time Lu Yi had heard of this. No one had ever mentioned this to him before. The main reason was that the only people above him in the Blue Blood sect were the sect leader and senior martial sister Shui Yuan. Normally, aside from cultivating, Lu Yi spent most of his time not in the Blue Blood sect. When he occasionally returned, the sect leader was always elusive. Shui Yuan only cared about whether he was doing well, and whether he had encountered any danger. Who would tell him these things that had already passed? According to Shui Yuan, there was a relationship between Thought Moon Immortal and his eldest senior martial brother. It seemed that Thought Moon Immortal had once served under his eldest senior martial brother. If that was the case, Thought Moon Immortal must have been present during the Great Battle of Li Plains. Now that she was revisiting this place, she clearly remembered some things. Lu Yi had never asked why she had come to Li Plains this time, but now it seemed that it was very likely related to what had happened in the past. Could it be that his eldest senior martial brother had left some treasure behind in Li Plains? That shouldn't be the case. If that was the case, Thought Moon Immortal would have taken it away long ago. Why would she wait until today? She wanted to use his strength to achieve her goal, which meant that she couldn't do it herself. There had to be some risk involved. Fortunately, he had already entered Li Plains, so he would soon know what Thought Moon Immortal wanted to do. Although she had remained silent, she was secretly urging her spiritual chi to change the direction of the spirit boat at a critical moment. She was clearly looking for something. For hours later, a black line visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared in front of him. As he got closer, Lu Yi discovered that it wasn't a black line at all, but a bottomless chasm that stretched across Li Plains. It was like a natural chasm that divided Li Plains into two. Chapter 920. The One-Line Sky. Looking at the bottomless ravine, Wuxia raised his eyebrows, Is this your destination? Is there a problem? Lu Yi asked. Although he wasn't sure if this place was their destination, it seemed very likely that it was. No problem. Ing Wuji shook his head. The one-line sky of Liwan was very famous in the Myriad Devil Ridge. No one knew how this huge and continuous ravine had appeared, but it contained many opportunities. Some people had found treasures left behind by powerful seniors in this ravine, and some people had found extremely precious minerals and collected precious spirit flowers and herbs. However, no matter how many opportunities there were, after so many years they had all been found. The one-line sky of today was just a bit special, and no one had come here to waste time. The spirit boat flew along the edge of the one-line sky, and when it reached a certain place, the silent thought moon immortal suddenly said, "Go down." Lu Yi hurriedly changed direction and steered the spirit boat into the depths of the one-line sky, with Ing Wuji following closely behind. At this time, he was also very curious about Lu Ye's purpose. Even if he was driven away now, he didn't want to leave. He couldn't figure out why Lu Yi had come here with such a clear purpose. They continued to go down, and after an unknown period of time, when they looked up again, there was only a ray of light above their heads. It was truly the one-line sky. At this point, Lu Yi could already vaguely sense the existence of a magnetic field, because his spirit energy was faintly being suppressed. The magnetic field wasn't something that only existed in magnetic but also deep underground, and it was very common. To Yi, the magnetic field was extremely frightening, so even if she had the ability to burrow through the ground, she wouldn't easily burrow too deep underground. If she was disturbed by the magnetic field, her spirit body would inevitably be damaged, and if the situation was serious, it was very likely that she wouldn't be able to maintain her spirit body and would disappear. Therefore, when burrowing through the ground, Yi was always a bit careful. The light around them was dim, but it didn't affect their vision. It wasn't until a certain moment that Thought Moon Immortal suddenly jumped up from the spirit boat and landed in a concave stone pit. Lu Yi and Ing Wuji followed closely behind. Ing Wuji frowned because he suddenly realized that Lu Yi didn't seem to be in charge of this trip, but the female cultivator called Shui Xian. Standing in the sunken stone pit, Thought Moon Immortal raised her hand to touch the stone beside her. Looking at the back of the woman in front of him, Ing Wuji suddenly felt that she looked familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. He couldn't help but recall the scene he saw from afar on the day of the siege of Lonely Mountain City. That was the battlefield of the Spirit Sea Realm warriors. The figure that escaped from the Lonely Mountain City that day was so similar to the one in front of him. A terrifying thought popped up in his mind. He involuntarily gulped and stiffly turned his head, just in time to see Lu Yi looking at him meaningfully, her eyes full of mischief and ridicule. Ing Wuji instantly understood. He wasn't wrong. The woman in front of him wasn't Junior Sister Water Deity. She really was that person. She was the woman that even a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator like the Mountain Pass Master was afraid of. Thinking back on everything that had happened along the way, Ing Wuji was on the verge of tears. He thought that nothing good would come out of getting involved with Lu Yi. Who would have thought that he would be involved in even bigger trouble? His legs and stomach were shaking, and his entire body was weak. Ing Wuji wished he could pass out right now. But what made him angry was that the feeling of terror lingered around him, making him more awake than ever. Thought Moon Immortal removed her disguise and even took off her mask. She pretended before because she was afraid that her identity would be exposed, and also because she didn't want to put too much pressure on Ing Wuji. Now that they were here, there was no need to keep up the disguise. No matter what, she would be exposed later. Lu Yi silently took off her mask as well. She took out the Mountain Pan saber from her storage space and held it in her hand. Don't do anything rash. Ing Wuji was shocked. For some reason, he had a feeling that Lu Ye was going to kill him. Lu Yi ignored him and only asked Thought Moon Immortal, "My lord, what should we do?" Thought Moon Immortal didn't even turn her head. She said indifferently, "Don't leave me by more than 10 feet. The conversation between the two was unclear, but Ing Wuji understood. He hurriedly nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. "I definitely won't leave. Senior, don't worry. This junior still cherishes his own life." He turned his head and looked at Lu Yi with resentment. His expression seemed to say, "You've screwed me over." As expected, those 3 drops of soul-cleansing water were not so easy to obtain. If he had known that there would be such a divine ocean realm cultivator on this trip, forget 3 drops, even 30 drops, he would have considered it. But no matter what, at this moment Wuxia felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. In front of him, Thought Moon Immortal had already activated her spiritual power. She raised her hand, and the array flags hidden in the surroundings were drawn into her hand. Shockingly, she had already set up many formations here. The arrays set up by a divine ocean realm cultivator were naturally exquisite. This was also the reason why this place had remained a secret for so many years. Although there were not many people who came to One Line Sky to search for treasures and opportunities, there were still people who came. If there was no array concealment, the opportunities here would not have been preserved until now. When Thought Moon Immortal unlocked the array, the stone wall in front of her suddenly trembled. Then a large stone wall slid to the side, revealing an inner passage. Thought Moon Immortal turned her head and stretched out her hand to Wuxia. Wuxia understood. When she unsheathed her Panshan saber, the saber light flashed, and blood spurted out from her palms at the same time. Wuxia was dumbfounded. He didn't know what Wuxia was trying to do. But something that made him even more dumbfounded soon happened, because he saw that Wuxia actually grabbed Thought Moon Immortal's jade hand. Not only did she grab it, but their fingers were also intertwined. At this moment, Wuxia's eyes almost popped out. Deep in his heart, he admired Wuxia to the extreme. The woman in front of him was an existence that even Wan Zhonggang had a headache and was afraid of. Her appearance was even more beautiful. It could be said that such a woman was rare in the entire 9 regions. The number of people who could match her could be counted on one's fingers. "My lord, please do as you wish. I will take care of myself." How about letting him explore the way ahead? Wuxia suggested again. Wuxia. Wuxia recovered from his stupor and flew into a rage. "Are you still human?" Only God knew what kind of danger was ahead. How could it be an ordinary danger that could make a powerhouse like Thought Moon Immortal feel as if she was facing a great enemy? Wuxia, this guy was simply bad. He actually wanted to explore the way himself. Fortunately, Thought Moon Immortal quickly said he can't. With his cultivation base, he can't hold on for more than 3 breaths. Wuxia immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Being weak also had its advantages. "Let's go." Thought Moon Immortal took a deep breath, and her plump chest rose high. Then her figure swayed and stepped into the dark passage. Wuxia completely relaxed his body and mind, letting her do whatever she wanted. Naturally, he was also taken in. At the same time, he didn't forget to tell Wuxia, "Keep up." Wuxia cursed Wuxia in his heart, but he could only obediently do as he was told. At this time he didn't dare to act rashly. Thought Moon Immortal was right in front of him. Even if he wanted to escape, he had to have the ability to do so. However, Wuxia was holding the hand of a woman who even ordinary Divine Sea Realm cultivators would feel ashamed of their inferiority. How audacious! What puzzled Wuxia even more was that Thought Moon Immortal seemed to be the one who took the initiative. Were all the seniors nowadays so bold? These two. What was their relationship? Before he could figure it out, Thought Moon Immortal lifted their hands, turned around and pressed herself against Wuxia's chest. Even more intimate. Wuxia was already numb. Apart from his shock, he was also envious of Wuxia's luck with women. At this moment, Wuxia and Thought Moon Immortal's posture was the same as when they fought against Wan Zhonggang. At first glance, it looked as if Wuxia was hugging Thought Moon Immortal. Wuxia's right hand was clasping Thought Moon Immortal's left hand, and pressed against her lower abdomen. However, he knew that Thought Moon Immortal was protecting him. There must be some danger ahead. So Thought Moon Immortal was blocking his path. "Don't think too much." Thought Moon Immortal's voice was soft and trembling. In such a posture, she could clearly feel Wuxia's scorching breath. Her neck was itchy and her ears were hot. "I know." Wuxia took a deep breath and calmed his mind. Teased. Suddenly there was the sound of something breaking through the air. In the pitch-black tunnel there was an instant flash of light. Wuxia's expression froze. He had no idea where this attack came from. By the time he noticed it, it was already right in front of him. In other words, this attack alone had almost exceeded the limit of what he could deal with. Thought Moon Immortal had unknowingly drawn a sword. Lu Yi, who was almost touching her body, could clearly feel a powerful force surging out of Thought Moon Immortal's body. He raised his sword and slashed down. The attacking light shattered. Thought Moon Immortal's footsteps did not stop, and she continued to move forward. Lu Yi followed like a shadow. Behind him was the lonely Wuxia, who was on tenterhooks. The Great Sage of Human Dao manga of the same name is already online. Everyone can download Tencent animation to support it. Chapter 921. The sound of blades slashing rang out incessantly as sharp rays of light slashed at her from the front. The long sword in Thought Moon Immortal's hand danced gracefully, blocking all the attacks that came at her. She activated her spiritual power to protect Lu Yi behind her. Like an indestructible mountain, she blocked all the incoming storms. A strange sense of security that she had never felt before rose in her heart. For the first time, Lu Yi couldn't help but seriously look at the woman in front of her. Unfortunately, because her back was facing her, she couldn't see much. She could only see her snow-white slender neck and her elegant hair. Her hair danced, tickling Lu Yi's neck and cheeks like little hands. It was visible to the naked eye that her neck, which was as white as jade, began to redden. Even though her back was facing Lu Yi, the perception of a divine sea realm cultivator was extremely powerful. She could clearly sense Lu Yi's gaze at this moment, which made the Thought Moon Immortal feel rather uncomfortable. The power of her attack became even more fierce. As if she was warning him, Lu Yi looked away. A soft exhalation came from the front. Thought Moon Immortal's tense body relaxed a little. She said, "I don't know what kind of treasure is hidden in front, but it's very likely to be a flying sword." These sword chi were all slashed out by that flying sword. Probably to divert Lu Yi's attention, or to make the situation less awkward, she took the initiative to reveal some information about this place. "I've been here several times, but I couldn't do my best each time. The furthest I went was 300 feet. So I need your help." Lu Yi's attention was indeed diverted. If the sword chi alone can force you to retreat, then what's the flying sword's main body like? Who knows? Thought Moon Immortal was obviously not sure of her judgment. If it was a wide area, she might be able to do it with her ability. However, the passage here was narrow, and there was no room to maneuver or dodge. Facing the slashes of the sword chi, she could only resist them head-on. In this way, she couldn't use any tricks. So she had to bring Lu Yi along. With the rainbow phoenixes, she could borrow the huge vitality in Lu Yi's body anytime and anywhere. There might be a possibility of success. Of course, it was only a possibility because no one knew how long this passage was. "Sir, have you never tried to sneak in?" Lu Yi asked. "I've tried, but it doesn't work. There should be a lot of restrictions here, and as long as someone steps into this place, it will immediately activate the wonders of the restrictions, and endless sword chi will attack continuously." After a slight pause, she said in a low voice, "Don't talk for now." Originally, he wanted to distract Lu Yi by talking, but who knew that it would make the situation worse, because when Lu Yi spoke, there was a hot stream of air rushing into the river. It made her feel very uncomfortable on her neck. Lu Yi understood tacitly. He kept his eyes forward and remained silent. He completely relaxed his body and mind, allowing the Thought Moon Immortal to lead him through the passageway. 500 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. After shattering countless sword chis, the three of them finally stepped into the deepest part of the missing Moon Immortal's territory. At this point, the frequency and strength of the sword chi attacks had reached an extremely shocking level. Lu Yi knew that he wasn't weak, but if he were to face such a situation alone, he probably wouldn't be able to withstand even a single sword chi. This made him very curious. Just what kind of flying sword without an owner could make an expert like the Thought Moon Immortal return empty-handed several times with just the sword chi it activated? Above spirit artifacts were artifacts, and above artifacts were spirit treasures. The flying swords inside were clearly not at the level of spirit treasures but beyond. What was above spirit treasures? Lu Yi really did not know because with his current cultivation base, artifacts were the most suitable for him. He could not activate things like spirit treasures at all. The 9-front formation was a spirit treasure. But until now, Lu Yi and Yi were still unable to activate the full power of the 9-front formation. Compared to the last time they came, The Thought Moon Immortal's strength had clearly improved, because the last time she came here, she was already at her limit, but this time it did not seem too difficult. Further ahead was the true test. As expected, the frequency and strength of the sword cheese had increased, and Lu Yi could clearly feel the vibrations from each of the Thought Moon Immortal's attacks. He could tell that she was starting to get serious. As they continued forward, the Thought Moon Immortal began to struggle. Lu Yi saw this, but there was nothing he could do. At this moment, he could only help the Thought Moon Immortal in terms of survival. If he interfered, it would only make the situation worse. With a hiss, the Thought Moon Immortal grunted. When the sword chi dispersed, it left a gash on her sword-wielding right hand. Blood seeped out, instantly dyeing her clothes red. However, the Thought Moon Immortal did not stop. Instead, she sped up. Hiss hiss hiss, sword chi constantly seeped out, slicing at the Thought Moon Immortal's body, gradually worsening her injuries. However, Lu Yi, who was protected by her, was unharmed. As for Wuxia, who was further behind, he was also unharmed as he trembled. The smell of blood gradually thickened. Lu Yi could feel the vitality in his body being continuously injected into the Thought Moon Immortal's body through the Rainbow Phoenix's dual flight, giving her the ability to continue fighting. Time passed extremely slowly. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the woman in Lu Ye's arms had become a bloody person. If the Thought Moon Immortal had come alone, she would have to retreat with such injuries. Because if she continued forward, she did not know if she would have the chance to retreat. The Great Sage of Human Tao latest chapters. Domain name, however, because of the injection of Lu Ye's vitality, although her injuries were not light, she did not feel weak at all. Moreover, she discovered that not only could she borrow Lu Ye's vitality, she could also borrow Lu Ye's spiritual power. As a result, Lu Yi had no choice but to take out a demon core from his storage pouch and stuff it into his mouth. Under such circumstances, consuming a demon core was the fastest way to replenish spiritual power. Lu Yi, can you still hold on? Lu Yi, who was eating the demon core, suddenly heard the Thought Moon Immortal's voice. He could not help but be stunned. This was the first time the Thought Moon Immortal had called him by his name since they met. No problem. Then I'll speed up. There was no end to the passage ahead, as if there was no hope in sight. The Thought Moon Immortal was getting impatient. As she finished speaking, the figures stuck close to each other quickly rushed forward. As the Thought Moon Immortal danced in her hands, clinking sounds could be heard. Wuxia, who was following behind, cried out. He hurriedly moved and chased after her. The missing Moon Immortal would protect Lu Yi, but she would not care about his life or death. He could only pray that the missing Moon Immortal was strong enough to hold on. Otherwise, once the missing Moon Immortal died, it would be his and Lu Ye's turn to die. Sword chi surged like tidewater, and the entire passageway became a sea of sword light. It was under such circumstances that the Thought Moon Immortal brazenly charged in. The sword light was destroyed in patches, and the injuries on her body gradually worsened. However, because of the continuous injection of Lu Ye's vitality, she still had the ability to continue fighting. This was a very strange situation. Finally, at a certain point, all the sword light was completely destroyed, and the passage became pitch black. Only the Thought Moon Immortal's heavy breathing could be heard. Are you done? Wuxia asked timidly from behind. Just as he finished speaking, another dazzling light lit up ahead. The sudden flash of light in the pitch-black darkness was so bright that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. An incomparably sharp killing intent attacked from the front. When Lu Ye's eyes narrowed, the Thought Moon Immortal had already brought him forward. It was a sword chi that seemed to be able to cut through the void. When the Thought Moon Immortal's longsword met it, the Spirit Treasure longsword actually let out a painful groan. The sword chi was blocked, but it did not disappear. Instead, it continued to slowly slash forward, as if it wanted to cut through the waist of all the intruders. When the crisp sound rang out, Lu Ye's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly looked at the Thought Moon Immortal's longsword. He saw that a small crack had appeared on the longsword. He could not hold on. Once the longsword broke, the three of them would most likely be in grave danger when faced with such a sword light slash. With a thought, Lu Yi made a decision. He raised the saber in his hand, The arm holding the saber bulged slightly for an instant and stabbed out with the starry sky. Specks of starlight landed on the sword qi. However, how could a true lake-stage cultivator like Lu Yi shake the sword qi that even the Thought Moon Immortal found so difficult to deal with? Gotcha! The crack on the longsword became much larger. At the critical moment of life and death, Lu Yi raised his other hand and grabbed the Thought Moon Immortal's sword-wielding hand. Spiritual power surged. On the long sword, a complex and complicated spirit pattern instantly formed. Moon reversal. The Thought Moon Immortal seemed to be able to sense the profoundness of this spirit pattern. She immediately became spirited. The long sword in her hand danced like a fluttering butterfly. In an instant she stabbed out more than 10 times. The fine sword light pierced the same spot on the sword qi. In the next instant, the seemingly solid sword qi suddenly broke apart from the middle. It split into two and shot towards the two sides of the cave wall. Without a sound, huge and deep slash marks instantly appeared on the two sides of the cave wall. After stabbing out more than 10 times, the Thought Moon Immortal seemed to have lost all her strength. She went limp in Lu Ye's arms. Lu Yi also had the illusion that his entire body had been sucked dry. Although he was unharmed, the Thought Moon Immortal was currently borrowing the power in his body. It could be said that the consumption was huge. His legs went limp. He hugged the Thought Moon Immortal and fell to the ground together. Heavy panting sounds came from their mouths. They were like fish out of water, rising and falling one after another. Wuxia, who was behind them, was dumbfounded. "What's wrong with you guys? Get up quickly." If they didn't get up now, he wouldn't be able to block another attack like the one just now. For a moment he had the idea of slipping away. Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal clearly realized this as well. They both struggled to get up. Lu Yi leaned against the cave wall while the Thought Moon Immortal nestled in his arms. They stared ahead vigilantly. From the beginning to the end, their interlocked fingers had never loosened. But fortunately, there were no more attacks coming from the front. The Great Sage of Human Doubt, latest chapter on the internet. Domain name that unbelievably powerful sword qi. Just now should be the last attack. Chapter 922. It was quiet in the dark passage. The constant sense of danger since they stepped into the passage had disappeared. Lu Yi leaned against the wall of the cave, and Thought Moon Immortal nestled in his arms. Both of them hurriedly used their own methods to recover their strength. The sound of mockery and eating was very abrupt in this silent atmosphere. Thought Moon Immortal didn't pay much attention at first, but soon realized that something was wrong because this sound didn't sound like the sound of a spirit pill being chewed. She scanned with her divine sense and was shocked, because she found that Lu Yi was actually eating a spirit pill. "Are you okay? How could a person eat a spirit pill?" She could be considered an experienced and knowledgeable person, but she had never heard of such a thing. A spirit pill did contain a huge amount of energy, but that was the essence of a demonic beast's cultivation. For a cultivator, it was impure and impure. Not to mention whether or not it could be refined and absorbed. Even if it could, it would make one's own spiritual energy extremely obscure. "I'm fine," Lu Yi casually replied and continued to eat the spirit pill. Large patches of gray fog rose from the talent tree, and the almost dried-up spiritual energy in his body quickly began to recover. Thought Moon Immortal didn't ask any more questions. Although Lu Ye's actions made her feel strange, now was obviously not the time to investigate. It wouldn't be too late to ask about the situation when she had time in the future. She continued to recover and adjust her breathing. Borrowing the huge vitality in Lu Ye's body, coupled with the foundation of Thought Moon Immortal's divine sea realm, her injuries were also rapidly recovering. Only her blood-stained clothes couldn't be changed for the time being. But these were all small details and didn't hinder anything. While the two of them were recuperating, Wuxia hid off to the side, not saying a word. This experience had been completely forced upon him, so no matter what happened next, it had nothing to do with him. What he needed to do was to preserve his little life. Once this matter was over, he would quickly part ways with Lu Yi. Time passed bit by bit. 4 hours later, Thought Moon Immortal said, "Let's go." She had almost recovered, and her injuries were much better. It didn't affect her strength anymore. When she got up, she turned around and walked out of Lu Ye's arms, but their hands never separated. No one knew if there would be any danger next. The rainbow phoenixes had been working, and it was also convenient for her to borrow strength from Lu Yi at any time. After walking for a while, a spot of light suddenly appeared in front of them. The light appeared abruptly. Before it reached a certain area, none of them noticed it at all. The moment they crossed a certain spot, the light suddenly appeared. Following the direction of the source of the light, the three of them walked for another 1,000 feet and arrived at the end of the tunnel. At the end was an abyss that made one's heart palpitate. Looking down, one couldn't tell how deep it was. The deep darkness seemed to be able to swallow everything. There was a stone bridge in front of them. The stone bridge was not wide and could only allow 3 people to walk side by side. At the end of the stone bridge, there was a towering stone pillar. The stone pillar stood straight in the abyss, and it was unknown how deep it was rooted. At this point, all 3 of them revealed shocked expressions. It was because numerous sword lights were drifting about in the chasm around the stone platform like a school of fish swimming endlessly. Shockingly, the bodies of those sword lights were flying swords of extraordinary quality. There were so many of them that it was difficult to calculate. Such a large number of flying swords, and the quality was extremely good. If he could bring them out, it would definitely be a windfall. Wuji's heart raced as he looked, but in the end he sighed inwardly. With a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator like Nian Yuxian here, no matter what good things there were, he would not have a share. He looked away. Out of sight, out of mind. Lu Yi and Nian Yuxian's gazes did not stop at the numerous flying swords, but fixed on the stone platform. In the center of the stone platform, there was a short sword that was only about 2 feet long. Although it was unknown how long it had been there, its surface was still as smooth as a mirror, and it shone brightly. When they looked at it, they immediately felt a cold and sharp sword intent, as if it wanted to cut through something as illusory as the gaze. The light that the 3 of them saw in the tunnel was released by this short sword. Nian Yuxian's guess was right. There were indeed flying swords of extraordinary quality here, but it was not just one but many. However, relatively speaking, the short sword on the stone platform was of the most outstanding quality. Lu Yi did not know what quality the short sword was, but from the information she had now, this short sword was definitely not at the level of a spirit treasure. If Nian Yuxian got her hands on such an item, then her deterrence would be terrifying. Such a short sword could be used as a flying sword, but it could also be used as a weapon for ghost cultivators. If she could get her hands on this sword, Nian Yuxian's strength would definitely increase greatly. When that time came, her life would be in danger. There's a formation. Nian Yuxian's gaze did not stop at the 2-foot short sword. She looked around and immediately made a judgment. Although Lu Ye's cultivation in the Tao of formations was far superior to cultivators of the same level, there was still a large gap between him and Nian Yuxian. Only with his reminder did she see some clues. Realization dawned on her. The moment the 3 of them stepped into the tunnel, they must have activated the power of the formation here, which was why there was an endless stream of sword chi. That was not only a hindrance but also a test. Who had left behind this short sword and so many flying swords? Who had set up this formation? What was the purpose of this test? Just as Lu Yi was deep in thought, Nian Yuxian had already taken his hand and walked forward. "I'll wait for you here," Wuji hurriedly shouted. Although the treasure was good, since he did not have a share of it, there was no need for him to take the risk. Waiting here obediently was the best choice for him. Nian Yuxian turned a deaf ear to him. It was not that she trusted Wuji, but that Wuji could not do anything under her watch. Nian Yuxian walked very slowly. As she walked, she kept sending out formation flags in all directions. If she wanted to reach the stone platform safely and retrieve the short sword, she would have to break the formation here. Although the formation here was extremely brilliant, it had been set up here for an unknown number of years. Hence, Nian Yuxian could still see some clues and flaws. Breaking the formation was not difficult for her. Lu Yi did not interfere. He only activated the spiritual tattoo of insight and observed silently, learning Nian Yuxian's method of breaking the formation. Layer after layer of the formation was broken. Nian Yuxian led Lu Yi across the stone bridge, which was only about 300 feet long, for almost 2 hours. Finally, they landed on the stone platform. Clang, the short sword stuck diagonally on the stone platform trembled slightly, letting out a clear sword hum. It seemed to have a mind of its own, joyful that it was about to welcome its new master. Nian Yuxian did not act rashly. Instead, she kept observing the surroundings, trying to see if there were any hidden formations. Lu Yi also activated the spiritual tattoo of insight. A moment later, Nian Yuxian let go of Lu Ye's hand and said, "Go back." Lu Yi pondered for a moment. His figure drifted backward, and soon landed beside Ing Wuji. Ing Wuji asked in a low voice Lu Ye that short sword. "What's its quality?" They were too far apart and he could not sense it clearly. Although he knew that he would not get a share of the good stuff here, he still wanted to know the details of the short sword. However, as expected, Lu Yi did not respond at all. He only stared at Nian Yuxian without blinking. On the stone platform, Nian Yuxian had already raised her hand to grab the short sword's hilt. The next moment, with a clang, the short sword was pulled out. She immediately looked around vigilantly, but it was quiet all around. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The treasure. She got it. Right when thought Moon Immortal was delighted in her heart and was about to retreat, her expression suddenly changed because a vortex had strangely appeared before her without the slightest sign. Moreover, what caused her to feel both shocked and furious was that the short blade in her hand actually uncontrollably emitted an indescribable impact. In an instant it filled her entire body. She was a divine sea realm cultivator, but this impact caused her spiritual power to scatter, and her body to become unstable. She had been on guard against any hidden traps around her. This was because such a treasure was too easy to get. But in the end there was still a flaw. The trap was not in the surroundings, but in the short sword itself. It could even be said that the formation she had broken earlier was just a smokescreen to confuse her. A huge suction force came from the vortex, and her body fell into it uncontrollably. As if sensing something, she turned around abruptly. On the other side of the stone bridge, Lu Ye's figure was like lightning pouncing toward her. His expression was urgent, and he reached out to her from afar. "Don't come over," Nian Yuxian shouted. But in the next instant Lu Yi was in front of her. Nian Yuxian gritted her teeth and hurriedly reached out to grab Lu Ye's hand. Lu Yi stood on the stone platform and used both hands to grab Nian Immortal's arm, urging his entire body to move. But it did not move at all. At this moment, Nian Yuxian's body was mostly swallowed up by the vortex. If he had not arrived in time, she would have disappeared without a trace. He did not know what was going on inside the vortex, but this change was clearly not a good thing. At this moment, a chaotic clanging sound suddenly rang out, accompanied by Ing Wuji's strange cry. Lu Yi turned his head to look and saw Ing Wuji running towards him. He was not here to help him. Instead, the flying sword that had been swimming around the stone platform like a fish was chasing him. The cold killing intent forced him to flee in this direction. In desperation, Ing Wuji's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Lu Yi. Looking at the overwhelming sword light behind Ing Wuji, Lu Yi sighed in his heart. He did not use any more strength and instead plunged into the vortex. He really did not know what was going on inside the vortex, but if he did not hide in the vortex, he and Ing Wuji would most likely die. Without Lu Yi dragging her, Nian Yuxian's figure quickly disappeared into the vortex. The moment her figure disappeared, Lu Yi saw the self-blame in Nian Yuxian's eyes. Then he felt a warm and soft body pressed against him, and the world began to spin. And after Nian Yuxian and Lu Yi disappeared into the vortex, Ing Wuji followed in their footsteps. Many sword lights followed closely behind and disappeared without a trace. A moment later the dust settled. There was only a stone bridge and an empty stone platform left. Endless darkness shrouded it. This arcane pocket realm was clearly different from what Lu Yi had experienced in the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield. At the very least, Missing Moon Immortal had also entered. In other words, this was a secret realm that could benefit even those in the spiritual sea stage. A secret realm like this could only be found by chance. He and Ing Wuji were both in the True Lake stage. If they could find some opportunities here, they would benefit for the rest of their lives. Ing Wuji also reacted, and his mood was immediately lifted. This time he had no choice but to follow Lu Yi and the thought moon immortal to Li Yuan's one-line sky. He originally thought that he was just a guide, but who would have thought that such a good thing would happen? Apart from being happy, he was also on guard. He wasn't a fool. He naturally understood that opportunities meant risks. A secret realm that could allow those in the divine sea stage to enter, who knew what kind of risks there would be. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji both had different thoughts. The thought moon immortal slowly stood up and said with a frown, "You want me to become your disciple?" To become someone's disciple was to become their disciple. She was a divine sea stage cultivator. In the entire 9 states she was already one of the top cultivators. Who in this world could be her master? What's more, she was a rogue cultivator. Since the day she started cultivating, she didn't have a master or a fellow disciple. With her current level of cultivation, she wouldn't find herself a master. Even if it was a secret realm. "You're not willing?" The old man looked at the thought moon immortal indifferently, completely ignoring her cold expression. "Whether you're willing or not, that depends on whether you have the ability." After saying this, the thought moon immortal shook her hand and stabbed the old man with her sword. What she held in her hand was the 2-foot short sword that she had taken from the stone platform. This kind of short sword was actually more suitable for her as a ghost cultivator's weapon, not as a sword cultivator's weapon. With her ghost cultivation attainments coupled with such a sharp sword, if she really succeeded in her sneak attack, no divine sea stage cultivator in 9 regions could withstand it. But even so, the power of this sword was peerless. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji both hurriedly dodged, for fear of splashing their blood. The two of them had no doubt about the strength of the thought moon immortal. Moreover, in any case, they suddenly came to such a secret realm and suddenly had to worship such an old man as their master. Both of them were somewhat reluctant. If the thought moon immortal could resolve this matter, it wouldn't be a bad thing. However, in the next moment, the pupils of Lu Yi and Ying Wuji shrank, and the eyes of the thought moon immortal were also filled with shock. Because the old man sitting upright didn't move. He just raised his hand, stretched out 2 fingers, and lightly caught the short sword in the hand of the thought moon immortal. The old man slightly narrowed his eyes, which flashed with a cold light, and faintly said, "The willow catkin was cast by this old man. This old man knows its power much better than you do." The thought moon immortal exerted her strength, but she still couldn't pull the short sword away from the old man's 2 fingers. Her heart was in turmoil, and only then did she realize that she had underestimated the old man's ability. But, was there really such a strong person in this world? Your temperament is not steady enough. Just because you have some cultivation base, you are arrogant. You are not suitable to be my disciple. Go. With that, he suddenly spat out a sword light from his mouth, which went straight to the thought moon immortal. The thought moon immortal's beautiful face turned pale in an instant. Because the strength of this sword light was something she had never seen before in her life. The old man's seemingly casual attack was already stronger than her full-strength attack. The moment the sword light came out of the old man's mouth, he also released the fingers that were holding the willow catkin short sword. The thought moon immortal took advantage of the situation to retreat, holding the sword in front of her. Accompanied by a clang, the thought moon immortal gave a muffled groan, and her entire body flew out like a willow catkin. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she had been sent to. The old man's voice sounded again. "Since the willow catkin has fallen into your hands, it means that it is fated to be with you. I hope you will not bury it." But he had no intention of leaving the willow catkin short sword behind. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji stood not far away, dumbfounded as they stared at this unbelievable scene, not daring to move. It was only when the old man turned his head to look at them that the two hurriedly walked back, side by side, and obediently sat in front of the old man. Ying Wuji even shouted, "Disciple Ying Wuji greets master." What thought moon immortal? What 10,000 feet iron? After seeing this old man's terrifying methods, Ying Wuji finally understood what it meant to say that there was always someone stronger. Taking such a master as his master was not shameful at all. He, Ying Wuji, had always been a flexible person. First, he had taken Lu Yi as his eldest senior brother, and today he had taken on a master. The old man smiled faintly. It's still too early to talk about taking on a master. Today, I am only taking the two of you into my sword instrument sect. My sword instrument sect has always been strict in accepting disciples, so whether or not you two can stay will depend on your own abilities. Wuji sat upright, feeling a little disappointed. He had thought he had managed to latch onto a big thigh, but who knew this old man wasn't taking him in as a disciple at all. My sword instrument sect's disciples are not only the most outstanding artifact refining grandmasters, but also the most outstanding sword cultivators. All flying swords used are refined by the sect's own hands. The two of you must remember this. Yes, Lu Yi and Wuji responded together. As obedient as kittens, this old man is Kong Kong, the 163rd generation sect master of sword instrument sect. Today, the two of you will be taking me as your master, so you must remember the sect's rules and commandments. What followed was a series of complicated sect rules, but whether it was Lu Yi or Wuji, both of them were cultivators, so it was not difficult for them to remember these things. Just as he was speaking, Kong Kong suddenly frowned and looked at Lu Ye's waist, revealing a displeased expression. You use a saber? Lu Ye's expression turned serious as he quickly realized where the problem was. It seemed that not only in the 9 prefectures, those who use sabers look down on those who use swords, and those who use swords look down on those who use sabers. The sword instrument sect was the same. Silently putting away the mountain pan saber, Lu Yi took out a long sword and hung it on his waist, calmly saying, "That is just disciple's spoils of war. Disciple is actually a sword cultivator." Wuji almost laughed out loud. But after noticing Lu Ye's sharp gaze, he quickly sat up straight. Kong Kong's expression relaxed a little. Remember, those who use sabers are all boorish men. The sword is the king of weapons. Yes. Lu Yi respectfully responded. Boorish men are not boorish men. You have the biggest fist, you have the final say. The two of you are new here today, so go ahead. Tomorrow this old man will teach you the method of refining weapons. When the two of you are able to refine flying swords, I will teach you the way of the sword. Lu Yi and Wuji respectfully withdrew. When they looked back, the sword instrument sect's sect master, who claimed to be Kong Kong, had disappeared. No one knew where he went, and only a thatched hut stood in the same place. The two looked at each other, and their hearts trembled. You explore the surrounding environment. Lu Yi ordered Wuji and chased in the direction where Thought Moon Immortal had been sent flying. The thatched hut was located in a valley, and one side of it was the Sword Mountain, which was full of flying swords just now. It was a spectacular sight. Wuji also had the same intention. As a newcomer, it was naturally important to explore the environment first. It was even more important to figure out what kind of world this was and what kind of test was waiting for them. The two separated, and Lu Yi went to look for Thought Moon Immortal. She soon found her, because Thought Moon Immortal had not gone far and was standing at the entrance of the valley. She had changed into clean clothes, but she had consumed a lot of energy before, and there were many injuries on her body, and her face was still a little pale. Seeing that she was safe and sound, Lu Yi was a little relieved and stepped forward. My lady? Thought Moon Immortal nodded. Did that old mister make things difficult for you? Before, she didn't put Kong Kong in her eyes, but after the confrontation, Thought Moon Immortal already understood that Kong Kong's cultivation was definitely much higher than hers. In other words, Kong Kong was most likely above the Divine Sea realm. This made Thought Moon Immortal very interested, and she had the idea of exploring, because the Divine Sea realm cultivators in 9 regions had been exploring the road of cultivation for many years. They could feel that the Divine Sea realm was not the end of a cultivator's journey, but they had no clue how to take that step. Seeing Kong Kong today, Thought Moon Immortal naturally wanted to find out. Unfortunately, she had offended him as soon as she came, and now it was not good to ask anything. Chapter 924. As they were talking, Wuji flew over and landed, looking helplessly at Lu Yi. Didn't I tell you to scout the environment? Lu Yi frowned. This guy was too careless. Wuji said, what you can see is all that can be scouted. What do you mean? Lu Yi frowned. Thought Moon Immortal said, don't blame him. This is a very small arcane realm. The entire arcane realm is just the valley and the spirit peak that we can see now, so there's no need to scout anything. Lu Yi was stunned. If Wuji had said that, he wouldn't have believed it, but since it came from Thought Moon Immortal, he had no choice but to believe it. After Thought Moon Immortal was sent flying from the thatched hut, she had clearly scouted the surroundings to come to this conclusion. How could there be such a small arcane realm in this world? The arcane realms that Lu Yi had experienced before were all set in a realm. Even the smallest arcane realm of the myriad beasts was 30% the size of the spirit stream battlefield. It seems that this really is a legacy arcane realm, Thought Moon Immortal said thoughtfully. Wuji frowned. Senior means to say that this arcane realm was specially created for a certain legacy? Hearing him say this, Lu Yi immediately thought of Wuxia. He didn't know what the arcane realm that Wuxia had inherited looked like. But Wuxia had mentioned that the legacy arcane realm seemed to be a very small arcane realm. Because this kind of arcane realm was specially created for a certain legacy, it didn't need to be too big. After passing the test in the arcane realm and obtaining the legacy, one could leave safely. Did that old man ask you to do anything? Thought Moon Immortal asked. Lu Yi nodded. He calls himself Kong Kong, and is the 163rd sect master of the Sword Artifacts sect. He asked Wuji and me to learn the art of forging artifacts from him, and after we have mastered the art, he will teach us the way of the sword. Thought Moon Immortal understood. It seems that this is the test of the arcane realm. She calmed herself down and looked at Lu Yi. This is an opportunity. Since you have encountered it, there is no reason to miss it. You can cultivate and learn in peace. Understood. Lu Yi replied. To be honest, he was not very interested in refining weapons. The main reason was that he had already practiced both the way of spiritual tattoo and the way of formation. He knew that a person's energy was limited. If he spent too much energy on the outer way, his own cultivation would definitely be affected. His master had taught him the Tao of inscription before, and he had practiced it for a period of time. However, in the end, he didn't cultivate it deeply because he didn't have enough energy. Furthermore, in a world like the 9 provinces, if one really needed anything, one could purchase it from the Tianji treasury or find someone to refine it for them. There was no need for one to be proficient in this field. Not all good eaters were chefs. The logic was the same. Moreover, he also had the War Merit Pavilion. There were countless good things inside, and as long as he had enough war merit, he could exchange for them. But if this is a test of the hidden territory, then I have to learn it. Senior, what's up with that emptiness sect master's cultivation? Wuji gathered his courage and asked. Just now, the scene of the empty sword chi sending the thought of Moon Immortal flying had scared him to death. His cultivation base, Thought Moon Immortal revealed a pensive expression. Much higher than mine. Above the divine sea, is there really a path ahead? Wuji became excited, causing Lu Yi to give him a sidelong glance. He didn't know what a true lake stage cultivator was so excited about. Thought Moon Immortal leisurely said, this is exactly what the divine sea stage cultivators of the 9 provinces have been searching for. Wuji said, divine sea stage cultivators of the 9 provinces have searched for nothing, but that emptiness sect master's cultivation base is above the divine sea. Doesn't this mean that he is not a cultivator of the 9 provinces? Thought Moon Immortal looked up at him. You know a lot. Wuji sighed. There are many opportunities in the 9 provinces and many inheritances. Since ancient times, many people have speculated that there may be many inheritances hidden in the world of the 9 provinces, and for various reasons, they fell into the 9 provinces. At first, I didn't believe it, but after what happened in the Wuxia continent, I have no choice but to believe it. The matter of the Wuxia continent was not a secret now. Not to mention that the fusion of domains in the Yunhe battlefield had long been known to the world. At present, many cultivators of the Wuxia continent had begun to walk in the 9 provinces, and there were even people who had founded sections. The information transmission in the 9 provinces was convenient, so naturally everyone knew about it. Thought Moon Immortal had also heard about the matters of the Wuxia continent, so when she heard Wuji's words, she understood what was going on. Perhaps this opportunity came from outside the 9 provinces, or perhaps it came from within the 9 provinces. Don't forget that the historical records of this era are only a few thousand years. No one knows what the 9 provinces looked like thousands of years ago. Whether there were cultivators above the divine sea stage, no one knows. If the sword tool sect was a sect from thousands of years ago, then this secret realm was a remnant from before this era. Senior is right. Wuji humbly accepted the teachings and looked very honest. In any case, that emptiness sect master is not a living person. It is very likely that he is the reappearance of some means of the heavens, or it may be an obsession left behind by a powerhouse. His cultivation base is indeed higher than mine when he was alive. When you two get along with him, you must be careful. For the first time, Wuji felt the concern from Thought Moon Immortal. Although he understood that this was just incidental, he was still very touched and couldn't help but nod. Senior, don't worry. Brother Lu is the best at getting along with people. He will not offend the emptiness sect master. Wuji will also follow his lead. Lu Yi was too lazy to pay attention to him and just looked at Thought Moon Immortal. My lord, what about you? Me? Thought Moon Immortal was startled for a moment. She looked down at the 2-foot short sword in her hand. Just take advantage of this time to refine this sword. You don't have to worry about it. Lu Yi nodded and turned to order Wuji. Go cut some wood. Wuji was puzzled. What for? This time we don't know how long we will stay here. There is only one thatched hut here. We can't eat and sleep in the open. That makes sense. Wuji nodded. Then why don't we go together? Lu Ye's gaze became fierce. Wuji shouted to Thought Moon Immortal, Senior, you saw it. He has been bullying people like this. Thought Moon Immortal smiled. It was the first time she saw two people from opposing camps get along like this. She said, you go by yourself. I have something to say to Lu Yi. Yes. Wuji immediately became obedient. After Wuji left, Lu Yi said, My lord, do you want me to inquire about the mystery above the deity ocean? Thought Moon Immortal shook her head slowly. This arcane realm is for the inheritance of the sword instrument sect, not for cultivation. So even if you inquire, you may not be able to find anything. Instead, you may say something wrong. What I want to tell you is that this arcane realm is not as peaceful as it looks. My lord, you mean, based on the current situation, the willow catkins are not an opportunity, but a bait. Thought Moon Immortal raised the short sword in her hand and said slowly, using the willow catkins as bait to make people greedy and enter this arcane realm of inheritance, pass the test, and obtain the inheritance of the sword instrument sect. This is also a common trick used in many places of inheritance. I can only blame myself for being greedy and not seeing through this layer. But if this is really the case, then since ancient times has no one else entered here. That place is indeed hidden, but if I can find it, others can naturally find it too. So before us, it is very likely that someone has already been here. But where are they? Lu Yi was slightly horrified. Of course, I'm not saying that Kong Kong is a bad person. But since this arcane realm of inheritance has been preserved until now, it means that so far, no one has passed the test. Even if someone had entered before they died here. Thought test to obtain the inheritance of the sword instrument sect. This is also a common trick used in many places of inheritance. I can only blame myself for being greedy and not seeing through this layer. But if this is really the case, then since ancient times no one has entered here. That place is indeed hidden, but if I can find it, others can naturally find it too. So before us, it is very likely that someone has already been here. But where are they? Lu Yi was slightly horrified. Of course, I'm not saying that Kong Kong is a bad person. But since this arcane realm of inheritance has been preserved until now, it means that so far, no one has passed the test. Even if someone had entered before they died here. Thought Moon Immortal stared at Lu Yi with a serious expression. This is the danger of the arcane realm of inheritance. Since you're here, you either obtain the inheritance and leave safely, or you'll never be able to escape. Lu Yi listened silently, understanding tacitly. Sir, you mean to say that it's very difficult to obtain the inheritance here and pass Kong Kong's test. No matter what, you have to be mentally prepared. Lu Yi nodded slightly, but soon thought of something. Sir, there's a problem. What? If the willow catkins are really bait to lure people into this arcane realm of inheritance, then there shouldn't be so much danger. You're powerful enough to pass through that passage and obtain the willow catkins, but others may not have the ability to do so. Perhaps they'll be killed in that passage before they even get close to the willow catkins. This doesn't match the original intention of the arcane realm of inheritance to lure people in. If they really wanted to lure people in, then it should be as simple as possible. It could even be said that as early as the first time Thought Moon Immortal came here, she had already obtained the willow catkins and been lured into this arcane realm. Perhaps that's the case. Nianyu Immortal did not deny Lu Ye's judgment. Her gaze was faint as she looked in the direction of the thatched hut. But what if that Kong Kong can sense the situation outside to a certain extent, and can even control the restriction outside? Lu Ye's expression turned serious. If that was the case, then it could be explained. The reason Thought Moon Immortal had not been able to obtain the willow catkins was that Kong Kong felt that she was not suitable to inherit the mantle of the sword instrument sect, so he had been stopping her. However, this time she had brought Lu Yi and Ying Wuji over, which gave Kong Kong hope and let her go. However, because Thought Moon Immortal had previous experience, the test could not be too easy, otherwise it would arouse her vigilance. She had to use all her strength to pass through that passage, and obtaining the willow catkins was the best result. If that was the case, then Kong Kong had gone through a lot of trouble. No matter what, it won't be easy to pass the test here. You have to be careful. I'll do my best. Lu Yi nodded. Even if he couldn't do it, there was still Ying Wuji. If he couldn't do it, then they could only think of another way to leave this arcane realm. However, this was a story for later. A moment later, Ying Wuji returned. Lu Yi worked with him to build 3 wooden huts at the entrance of the valley, which would serve as their temporary residence for the time being. The 3 wooden huts were separated by several feet. Lu Yi was in the middle, Ying Wuji was on the left, and Thought Moon Immortal was on the right. This way it would be convenient for them to take care of each other. Chapter 925. During this period, Lu Yi was a little unwilling to give up, and went out to investigate the surrounding environment. However, he found that it was indeed as Thought Moon Immortal and Ying Wuji had said. He could see everything in the mystic realm. The entrance of the valley was not connected to the outside world. It was chaos and there was no way forward. Lu Yi did not dare to rashly go in. He tried to throw a spirit stone in, but there was no sound at all. He did not know what would happen if he entered. There was no sun, moon, or stars in this small mystic realm, but there were. Day and night. It was really strange. After a night of rest, Lu Yi and Ying Wuji obediently went to the thatched hut the next day. In front of the thatched hut, Kong Kong was already sitting there with 2 futons in front of him. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji bowed and sat upright, listening to Kong Kong's teachings. He didn't ask the 2 of them if they had any prior experience in artifact forging. In any case, he taught them from the very basics. But then again, although he looked old, he really had a way of teaching people. Many of his explanations were simple and easy to understand, allowing Lu Yi and Lu Li to understand clearly, benefiting them greatly. It was like this for several days. It was not until 3 days had passed that he began to teach the 2 practical things. In the 9 provinces, no matter what kind of outer Dao one cultivated, they all needed to rely on spirit inscriptions. Array Dao had its own specialized spirit inscriptions. Alchemy had its own spirit inscriptions, and refining naturally had its own spirit inscriptions. For many outer Dao, spirit inscriptions were the foundation. Therefore, outstanding spirit inscriptionists, no matter what kind of outer Dao they cultivated, could achieve twice the result with half the effort. After teaching the 2 the basic knowledge of refining, Kong Kong began to teach them the construction of some spirit inscriptions. This was Lu Ye's strength, but he did not use it. He did not completely reveal his talent in the Dao of spirit inscriptions, only using half of his strength. Even so, his performance was not bad. Although Ying Wuji's attainments in the Dao of spirit inscriptions were not as good as Lu Ye's, since he had cultivated Array Dao, he naturally had come into contact with spirit inscriptions. It was just that he had not learned the specialized spirit inscriptions for refining. However, the construction was not as smooth as Lu Ye's, and it seemed bumpy, but he could still barely complete the requirements. The days passed one by one, and nothing happened. It was not until half a month later, after Lu Yi finished constructing a spirit inscription, he finally could not help but ask, Sect Master, little brother has something to ask. Speak. Kong Kong looked over warmly. Recently, Lu Ye's expression had undoubtedly made him very satisfied. However, he was very satisfied with Lu Ye's recent performance. He was indeed very satisfied and tolerant. After pondering for a moment, he opened his mouth and said, "Since that's the case, this sect leader will give the two of you a test. If you can complete it, this sect leader will agree to your request." "Sect Master, please ask for instructions." Kong Kong spread out his hands. In the next moment, spiritual power surged and turned into visible patterns. They constantly changed and turned into spiritual tattoos used for refining. Lu Yi and Ing Wuji watched with rapt attention. They found that some of these spiritual tattoos had been taught by Kong Kong, and some had not been taught. After a moment, Kong Kong withdrew his hand and said while stroking his beard, "Just now, this sect master showed you a total of 10 spiritual tattoos. If you can complete them in 2 hours, you will pass this test." Ing Wuji's face was bitter. He didn't need to try to know that he would definitely fail. Because of the 10 spiritual tattoos, 5 of them had not been taught by Kong Kong at all. Now that he had only seen them once, it was impossible to learn them. He turned his head to look at Lu Yi, only to see that Lu Yi had already spread out his palm and began to construct. At this moment, Lu Yi was extremely glad that he had held back when he learned these spiritual tattoos, and did not reveal all his talent. Otherwise, there would probably be no test. Kong Kong thought that he and Ing Wuji would definitely not be able to pass the test, so he came up with this difficult problem. However, Lu Yi was confident that he could complete it. As the spiritual tattoos were constructed on Lu Ye's hand, Kong Kong's expression gradually became surprised, because he found that he had underestimated this disciple's heavens. Talent. 4 hours passed in a flash. When the time was up, Lu Yi was trying to construct the last spiritual tattoo. This spiritual tattoo was quite complicated. He had already tried more than 10 times, but he failed every time. After another hour, Lu Yi finally succeeded in constructing the 10th spiritual tattoo. Looking up at Kong Kong with a somewhat haggard expression, the sword tool sect master nodded and said, "In this case, you will pass the test. Go back and rest for a day. Come back to this old man tomorrow and I will teach you the method of refining." "Yes." Lu Yi let out a long sigh. Spending half a month to pass the first test was nothing to be happy about. As for what to do next, he had no idea. He had no clue. Thinking about it, he could only try to speed up the progress of refining and find a way to leave at the same time. "Sect Master, what about me?" Ing Wuji asked. "You continue to cultivate spiritual tattoos." Kong Kong casually replied. Of the 2 disciples taken in, it was enough to have one with outstanding talent. The other was just incidental and did not count on anything. Ing Wuji's face was covered in tears. When he returned to the wooden house, Lu Yi suddenly saw the figure of Thought Moon Immortal. She was sitting on a chair in front of the wooden house, and Hu Po was squatting on her legs. After being in contact with her for a long time, Hu Po was not afraid of her anymore. Instead, under her touch, he snored loudly. Lu Yi hurriedly went forward, "Milady." In this half a month, he and Ing Wuji had been learning spiritual tattoos at Kong Kong's place. Thought Moon Immortal had been in seclusion, refining the willow catkin dagger. It was not until today that she came out. "How is it?" Thought Moon Immortal asked. Lu Yi truthfully told her about his experience in the past half a month. There was nothing much to say. It was nothing more than constantly learning to construct spiritual tattoos for refining. Then he talked about what happened just now. Thought Moon Immortal nodded. "Now it seems that only by speeding up the progress can you leave here as soon as possible. But no matter how fast you speed up the progress, the time spent will not be too short. If only we could invite the Tianji pillar." Lu Yi sighed. If they could invite the Tianji pillar, they could use it to teleport out of here. However, things like inviting the Tianji pillar could only be achieved in the Cloud River battlefield. It was impossible in 9 regions, and it was also impossible in such a secret realm. At least he and Ing Wuji had something to do recently. Thought Moon Immortal was pitiful, trapped here with nothing to do. "Milady, what else do you want?" Thought Moon Immortal shook her head. Lu Yi was about to leave, But he heard her say, if I take all the flying swords on the sword mountain, take it all. Will the old guy kick us out? Unlikely. Lu Yi shook his head. He silently added in his heart, the most likely thing is that you will be taught a lesson. There's no harm in trying. As Thought Moon Immortal spoke, she soared into the sky. Hupo was suddenly thrown out, startled from his sleep. When he woke up, he meowed miserably and fell to the ground in a hurry. Lu Yi looked up and saw Thought Moon Immortal's figure quickly rushing towards the Sword Mountain. However, just as she reached the range of the Sword Mountain, her elegant figure fell uncontrollably. Lu Ye's eyelids twitched, and he immediately realized. There was probably a no-fly restriction on the Sword Mountain, so it was impossible to fly up. Falling to the ground in a sorry state, Thought Moon Immortal did not give up. She climbed up on foot and soon arrived at the location of the first flying sword. However, before she could reach out to pull out the sword, a sudden change occurred. An illusory figure appeared like a ghost, slowly pulling out the sword from the Sword Mountain. He saluted Thought Moon Immortal, Sword Toolsec's 36th generation disciple. Wang Yang, please enlighten me. Chapter 926. The person who called himself Wang Yang was clearly not a living person. He was more like a spirit or an obsession. However, he was pale and lifeless, as if he could dissipate at any time. But his sword manipulation technique was extremely impressive. Lu Yi watched from afar. She saw flying swords flying back and forth at the foot of the Sword Mountain. The sword light was wanton as Nianyu Immortal fought with it. What Wang Yang displayed was a technique that could only be performed by a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator. Even the flying swords on the Sword Mountain were so powerful? Lu Yi was extremely shocked. And this was only the first flying sword at the foot of the mountain. No one knew what would happen if they went further up. After a while, the battle ended. Wang Yang's figure disappeared. Only a flying sword fell in front of Nianyu Immortal. Nianyu Immortal was deep in thought. She picked up the flying sword on the ground and continued forward. Soon, a second figure blocked her path. Lu Yi observed for a while and roughly understood the mystery of the Sword Mountain. Almost every flying sword was a sword left behind by a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator. There must be a wisp of the owner's will or spirit left in them. Once someone climbed the Sword Mountain, the power of the flying sword would be triggered. This was also a test. A test of the Sword Toolsec's Sword Dao. Lu Yi was enlightened. When the three of them entered this secret realm, Nianyu Immortal was sent flying by Kong Kong because she spoke rudely. But now it seemed that it was not just a simple lesson. Kong Kong intended for her to inherit the Sword Toolsec's Sword Dao. With Kong Kong's eyesight, she could definitely tell that Nianyu Immortal was a sword cultivator. Letting a divine ocean realm cultivator like her ascend the Sword Toolsec's Sword Dao was naturally better than choosing two true lake realm cultivators. And what Lu Yi and Ing Wuji needed to do was to cultivate the Sword Toolsec's Sword Dao. Lu Yi could not help much with Nianyu Immortal ascending the Sword Mountain. So after watching for a while, she turned and returned to her wooden hut to conserve energy and prepare for tomorrow's Sword Dao. The next day, Lu Yi and Ing Wuji came to the straw hut together. Kong Kong first passed a spiritual pattern to Ing Wuji. Then, under Ing Wuji's resentful annoyance, he led Lu Yi in a direction. After a while, they arrived in front of a stone wall. The stone wall was smooth and flat, and it was obvious that someone had chiseled it. With a wave of his hand, the stone wall slid to the side, revealing a passage that led downwards. An astonishing heat wave is coming from the tunnel. This place is our sect's weapon refinement workshop. It is maintained by many exquisite grand formations, and is the most important foundation of our sect. Many of our sect's flying swords come from this place. If it was in the past, ordinary disciples wouldn't be able to enter. Kong Kong let out a long sigh, reminiscing about the sect's past glory. Let's go. He called out to Lu Yi and led the way. The deeper they went, the hotter the temperature became. If an ordinary true lake realm cultivator came here, they would have to circulate their spiritual energy to resist. However, for Lu Yi, who had a fire attribute spiritual energy, such an environment was not harsh at all, but comfortable and pleasant. However, even he would have to slightly circulate his spiritual energy to resist the burning sensation if he were to go any deeper. He didn't know how deep he had gone when a huge karst cave suddenly appeared in front of him. Inside the karst cave, the environment was harsh and the heat wave swept through, distorting the void. Various weapon refinement tables of various sizes were distributed throughout the karst cave. All kinds of refining tools were placed according to their categories. Even if no one had come here for a long time, it still appeared to be in good order. Kong Kong led Lu Yi to the smallest refining table and said, "There is the fire of the earth lung underground. When refining, you can use the fire of the earth lung to temper the materials, saving time and effort." As he said this, he raised his hand and pointed at a certain part of the refining table, activating the restriction. In an instant, at the corner of the refining table, a dragon head spewed out flames. There are also many things to pay attention to when refining tools. These things can't be explained verbally. The many refining tools on the table began to briefly introduce the functions of these things to Lu Yi. Lu Yi listened quietly, but his eyes were fixed on the dragon's head that was spewing flames. This thing was the fire of the earth lung. Since it was fire, the talent tree should be able to absorb and devour it. Although it was hidden underground, it should not be difficult for Lu Yi to devour it now. The roots of the talent tree could be extended. After the talent tree transformed, its need for fuel greatly increased. Lu Yi had to be very heavy. Type 5. When devouring and absorbing external forces for cultivation, the consumption of fuel was very serious. It should not be a problem to store the fire of the earth lung and use it as 9 poles of the big girl tree. Kong Kong was still talking to Lu Yi, but he did not expect Lu Yi to have such an idea. During the talk, he also let Lu Yi try out the refining tools, and Lu Yi naturally complied. He said, "Why don't you try it out? This old man is now refining a handle. You watch and learn with your heart. How much you can learn will depend on your ability and comprehension." "Yes," Lu Yi respectfully replied. The next moment, Kong Kong turned his palm and took out a piece of mineral the size of a human head from somewhere. He placed it on the refining table and urged the fire of the earth lung to smelt it. At the same time he said, "If you want to refine a good flying sword, you must choose good materials. The way of refining tools starts with the selection of materials and forging materials. It is like a person's cultivation. Only with a good foundation can the following steps be better." The next half of the day was spent in Kong Kong's refining and explaining. His movements were not fast, obviously to make it easier for Lu Yi to observe and learn. It was not until a new long sword was out of the furnace that the demonstration was over. Although Lu Yi wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, seeing a weapon refining grandmaster refine a flying sword in such a short time with his own eyes, he couldn't help but feel admiration for this young man. Moreover, this long sword contained 72 restrictions, which made it a flying sword of the magic tool level. Such a flying sword, if placed in the Tianji treasure house, could be sold for tens of thousands of merit points. Tens of thousands of merit points were not much for Lu Yi, but for most cultivators, it was not a small number that could be ignored. "How much do you understand?" Kong Kong asked. Lu Yi frowned. 30%? Yes. Kong Kong nodded. "It's good that you can understand 30%, but if you really want to use it, you may not even understand 5%. Disciple will try it?" Lu Yi volunteered. Kong Kong happily said, "You do it." The refining materials were provided by Kong Kong, and the quality was not high. After all, it was for Lu Yi to practice, so naturally he did not use good things. The quality was low, so the refining difficulty was also low. But even so, Lu Yi's progress was bumpy. Fortunately, refining tools had one advantage, and that was, if the refining failed, it could be reforged in the furnace. Unlike alchemy, once the refining failed, everything would be ruined. Therefore, refining tools saved a lot of raw materials compared to alchemy. When Lu Yi was refining tools, Kong Kong would give him pointers from time to time. He was extremely patient, and Lu Yi also studied diligently, making rapid progress. For 3 days in a row, the two of them spent their time like this. Only the sound of hammering could be heard in the whole refining workshop. Until 3 days later, Lu Yi held a long sword in his hand, looking dispirited. In 3 days, he had refined his first long sword. Although the appearance was sloppy, the quality was not complimentary. It contained only 5 restrictions, and it was just a low-grade spirit weapon. Kong Kong was very happy. Not bad, not bad, your talent in spirit patterns is really high. So, when refining tools, you can also get twice the result with half the effort. Refining tools was not just about refining the shape of a spirit weapon. If it was only like this, then ordinary blacksmiths could do it, and Lu Yi did not need to use a refining table. With his current cultivation and methods, Kong Kong could mold some low-quality raw materials into any shape he wanted. But the refining of a cultivator was to melt restrictions into the spirit weapon, while molding the shape of the spirit weapon. This was the key. A spirit weapon without restrictions could not be used at all. Lu Yi had refined a lot of array flags before, but compared with refining array flags and refining tools, there was simply no comparison. How much time did it take Sect Master to reach this level? Lu Yi asked. An expression of reminiscence appeared on Kong Kong's face as he said, "This old man spent 8 days, and the quality of the sword I refined wasn't as good as yours. There were only 3 restrictions. If you can maintain this progress, you will be able to refine a flying sword that meets the requirements within 3 years. 3 years is still long. Go rest, but don't forget to reflect on your gains and losses. In the future, come to the thatched hut every morning, and this old man will teach you the wonders of refining tools. In the afternoon, come here and start refining tools. If there is anything you do not understand, you can ask this old man at any time." Yes. Returning to the wooden hut from the refining workshop, Lu Yi glanced in the direction of Sword Mountain. Thought Moon Immortal was still climbing the mountain, fighting with the obsession and spirit in the flying swords, but her progress was not slow. At this moment, she had already climbed 100 zhang of Sword Mountain. Hu Pe, who had stayed here, came over and looked at Lu Yi with concern. "I used up a bit of energy, but I'll be fine after some rest," Lu Yi said. These words were naturally for Yi to hear. Since coming to this secret realm, Yi did not dare to show her face. After all, Kong Kong's cultivation was too frightening. Returning to the wooden hut, she did not meditate to rest but fell asleep. When she woke up, she felt refreshed. According to Kong Kong's previous instructions, she first went to the thatched hut to find him and listen to him talk about the essence of refining tools. In the afternoon, undering Wuji's annoyance, she went to the refining workshop. This time, Kong Kong did not accompany her. Lu Yi did not dare to be careless and continued to refine tools. Only the heavens knew if Kong Kong had any means to monitor the situation inside the refining workshop, so he still had to continue refining tools. Moreover, if he really wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, he had to pass Kong Kong's test as soon as possible. 3 years was too long. Lu Yi set the standard for himself to leave this secret realm in half a year at most. Within half a year he had to leave this secret realm. If he stayed here for too long, only the heavens knew how worried his second senior sister and the others would be. He clicked to download the best book chasing app. Many readers use this to read books aloud. Chapter 927. However, at the same time, Lu Yi did not forget his previous plan to use the environment here to store fuel for his talent tree. He quietly activated the power of his talent tree, and roots that only he could see extended from his feet into the depths of the ground. The roots could not extend too far, but since the fire of the earth lung could be drawn to the refining table, it meant that the location of the fire of the earth lung could not be too deep. Therefore, there was a high chance that the roots of his talent tree could directly reach inside. He activated his mind and controlled the roots to search underground. Soon he found the location of the fire of the earth lung. The next moment, the roots emitted a devouring power and swallowed the energy of the fire of the earth lung. After the talent tree completed its transformation, Lu Yi could control where the absorbed energy went. It could be used as fuel for the talent tree, or used to ignite the leaves of the talent tree to activate new spiritual inscriptions. He had previously obtained 7 spiritual inscriptions at once and had not fully comprehended them yet, so he did not plan to activate other spiritual inscriptions. Moreover, he was not in the mood to study new spiritual inscriptions here, so he stored all the energy he absorbed as fuel. He was the only one in the huge refining workshop. Lu Yi took off the Scarlet Dragon battle suit and exposed his upper body. He was sweating profusely in front of the refining table. Every time the refining hammer smashed down, there would be an additional pattern in the sword embryo. As the number of patterns continued to increase, a spiritual inscription gradually took shape. Thus, a restriction was formed. This method of using the refining hammer to strike the sword embryo to construct spiritual inscriptions was undoubtedly countless times more difficult than using his spiritual power. Therefore, refining weapons was not something that could be done simply by constructing spiritual inscriptions. Days passed by. Lu Yi made rapid progress on the path of refining weapons. Because he had set a goal for himself to leave the secret realm in half a year, Lu Yi was really diligent in learning the path of refining weapons. Search. Every morning, he would go to the thatched hut on time to listen to Kong Kong's teachings. The sword instrument sect master was undoubtedly very satisfied with Lu Yi's performance. Moreover, it was rare to encounter such an outstanding disciple in this secret realm. It was very likely that Lu Yi would be able to inherit the sword instrument sect's Tao of equipment refinement. Therefore, he didn't hold back in the slightest when he imparted his knowledge to Lu Yi, which helped Lu Yi grow even faster. The first spiritual weapon that Lu Yi refined was a 5-restriction lower-grade spiritual weapon. After 2 days, he could already refine a 9-restriction lower-grade spiritual weapon. 9 restrictions was the limit of a low-grade spirit artifact. Any higher and it would be a middle-grade spirit artifact. In the past, Lu Yi didn't really understand the difference between 9 restrictions and 10 restrictions. He simply felt that the difference of 1 restriction wasn't much of a difference. But when he actually started refining, he realized that there was a big difference. This was because the difficulty of refining a 10-restriction spirit artifact was incomparable to refining a 9-restriction spirit artifact. In another 10 days, Lu Yi could already easily refine a mid-grade spirit artifact, and the quality was not bad. A month later, the first high-grade spiritual weapon was born in his hands. At this time, Wuxia had just passed the first test and entered the artifact refining workshop to begin refining with Lu Yi. Comparing the two, it was obvious who was superior. Kong Kong's expectations of Lu Yi grew even higher because Lu Yi's performance so far had repeatedly exceeded his expectations, even to the point of being somewhat unbelievable. He didn't know that the reason why Lu Yi could make such rapid progress was not only that he was a spiritual tattooist, but also that he had divine thoughts. When urging his divine thoughts, Lu Yi could clearly sense the situation inside the spirit artifact he was refining. In this way, he could adjust his strength accordingly. Spiritual sense was indeed of great help to weapon refinement. The more outstanding Lu Yi's performance, the worse Wuxia seemed to be. Originally, Kong Kong would take the initiative to teach Wuxia some things about refining, but after a month, unless Wuxia took the initiative to ask, Kong Kong no longer took the initiative to teach him anything. Obviously, with Lu Yi as his hope, Kong Kong didn't care at all whether Wuxia was there or not. Wuxia didn't complain. Kong Kong didn't care about him, so his days were leisurely. He even hoped that Lu Yi could refine a flying sword that met the requirements as soon as possible and pass the test of the mystic realm. Then he could also go out. Like Lu Yi, he didn't have much interest in the Tao of refining. Interesting, before he had no choice but to do it. Now, if he wasn't willing, he would go cultivate on his own and be very happy. The days in the mystic realm were dull and monotonous. Lu Yi was completely immersed in refining. He didn't even go back to the wooden house and spent almost all his time in the smithing workshop. Occasionally, Kong Kong would go to the smithing workshop to teach Lu Yi. Another month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Lu Yi looked at the newly refined extreme-grade spiritual weapon in his hand. His mood was calm. Soon, in 2 months, his refining progress had reached the level where he could refine a supreme-grade spiritual weapon. Wuxia obviously wasn't qualified to accompany him. What's going on? Lu Yi slowly shook his head. He also didn't understand the situation. At this moment, Kong Kong's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Come to the thatched hut. Yes, Lu Yi replied and flew towards the thatched hut. When he turned his head, he found that Wuxia didn't follow. He frowned. Let's go. Wuxia cried. I can't move. Lu Yi instantly understood that Kong wanted him to go alone. Wuxia obviously wasn't qualified to accompany him. Then you wait, Lu Yi said and turned to leave. Soon Lu Yi flew to the front of the thatched hut. Just like the first time they met, Kong Kong sat there. Lu Yi stepped forward and bowed. Sect Master. Sit. Kong Kong said softly, looking into the distance, his eyes deep. Lu Yi sat cross-legged in front of him. He vaguely felt that Kong Kong called him over should have something to do with the changes just now. But after waiting for a while, Kong Kong didn't say anything. Lu Yi didn't want to disturb him. Although he had been trapped here for a while, to be honest, Lu Yi was still very grateful to this old man. No matter what, he did teach him the art of refining very carefully and didn't hide anything. In 2 months he could make such great progress in the art of refining. His own foundation wasn't weak, but the most important thing was that he had such a good teacher. The time has come. Kong Kong suddenly sighed. Sect Master? Lu Yi frowned. He felt that Kong Kong was a little bleak today, but he also felt a little relieved. It was just that these words were vague. It's about time. Kong Kong smiled, looked away and looked at Lu Yi. This old man is just an obsession. The real Kong Kong died long ago. Obsession? Lu Yi wasn't surprised because on the first day he came here, Thought Moon Immortal had already guessed. The so-called obsession is nothing more than the manifestation of divine sense. The real Kong Kong. It's him and it's not him. For the sake of the sect's inheritance, it has lasted until today. In these thousands of years some people have come here but no one has ever passed the test until this old man saw you. As he spoke, Kong Kong looked at Lu Yi with a gratified gaze. Your talent in the art of refining is no less than this old man's. In fact, you're even stronger than this old man. This old man thought that I could see the day you finished your apprenticeship, but now it seems that it's just an extravagant hope. Sect Master, what happened? Lu Yi asked. Something has happened. Kong Kong sighed. But it has nothing to do with you. This arcane realm can't be maintained any longer. Why? Lu Yi frowned. Kong Kong knew that he was an obsession. Naturally, he also knew that this was an arcane realm. If the arcane realm couldn't be maintained, it meant that Lu Yi and the others could leave this place. But when things came to this, Lu Yi didn't feel too happy. Instead, his mood was a little heavy. No matter how powerful the restriction is, there will be a day when it loses its effectiveness. This arcane realm can be maintained, but it naturally consumes energy. Now, the foundation that maintains the arcane realm is showing signs of instability, so the arcane realm can't be maintained any longer. Hearing this, Lu Yi suddenly felt a little uneasy, and asked tentatively, the foundation that maintains this arcane realm, what is it? Chapter 928. The foundation of this arcane realm lies in the weapon workshop, and the foundation of the workshop lies in the fire of the earth lung, Kong Kong said. Lu Ye's expression froze. This reminded him of the 3 great arcane realms of the human clan on the Wuxia continent. The 3 great arcane realms had always drifted in the void and were not visible. However, after the divine pillar absorbed the power of the ley line of the arcane realms, the 3 great arcane realms lost their ability to drift in the void because their foundation was destroyed. It was similar to the current situation. I thought this place could last for a few more years. At least it would not be a problem for you to finish your apprenticeship, but I can only say that it's fate. Kong Kong looked at Lu Yi with relief. Fortunately, you are talented. In the future, even without my guidance, you may surpass me in the art of weapon forging. My obsession should dissipate. Sect Master. Lu Yi did not know what to say for a moment. He could not say that he was the cause of the changes in the arcane realm. He did not expect such a thing to happen. His original intention was to store more fuel for the talent tree in case of emergency. Who knew that this would lead to the destruction of the arcane realm? For almost 2 months, he had been urging the power of the talent tree to devour the fire of the earth lung every day. The talent tree had now stored a large amount of energy. Don't be sad. My original body has long disappeared. Only my obsession remained for thousands of years. Now that I can see the good results, it can be said that God has treated me well. As he spoke, Kong Kong took out an ancient jade slip. Although I really want to see the day you finish your apprenticeship, since it has already happened, there is no reason to avoid it. This is the sword instrument sect's essence of weapon refining and sword principle quintessence. In the future, without my guidance, you can study it by yourself. Yes. Lu Yi took the jade slip and carefully put it away. Kong Kong turned his palm, and a 1-foot-long gourd appeared in his palm. The surface of the gourd was covered with many complicated lines. It did not look like it was man-made, but more like it was natural. As for its quality, Lu Yi could not tell at a glance. The sword gourd is the keepsake of the sword instrument sect's sect leader. This item was born from nature, and was picked up by the 9th founding master in a desperate situation. Later, it was slightly refined by the 13th founding master. Many of its mysteries have been passed down to this day. Today I'm giving it to you. I hope that you can bring honor to the sword instrument sect one day. Lu Yi once again reached out to take it. It was heavy. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth and said, "Sovereign, can you leave with me?" Although Lu Yi already knew that the Kong Kong in front of him was just an obsession, they were still master and disciple after all. In addition, Kong Kong's strength was outstanding. If he could bring him out of the secret realm, he would be a great backer. His sword chi was able to cut back a powerhouse like Thought Moon Immortal. His strength was definitely stronger than many of the current Divine Sea Realm in 9 regions. Kong Kong smiled and shook his head. The fact that this old man has been able to survive for thousands of years is already a blessing from the heavens. With the current situation of the 9 regions, this old man's obsession will definitely not appear outside. There was a deeper meaning to his words. Lu Yi fell into deep thought. Kong Kong waved his hand. "You and I have come to an end. Let's go." A soft force brushed against Lu Ye's face. Without any resistance, Lu Yi was pushed out. When he came back to his senses, he had already returned to the entrance of the valley. Wuxia had returned to this place at an unknown time. Still wearing a tiger head hat on his head, Thought Moon Immortal, who had been climbing the sword mountain, also returned. She looked at Lu Yi and said, "What did that old man say? What happened here?" "The foundation of this secret realm is unstable. It's probably going to collapse." Lu Yi briefly explained the information he knew. Thought Moon Immortal frowned. "Then we have to find a way to leave quickly. Once the secret realm collapsed, it would inevitably cause a huge commotion. If they didn't leave quickly, it was very likely that they would be swept into it. At that time, their life and death would be unpredictable." As they were talking, they suddenly heard a low shout from the thatched hut. "Come!" A clear and melodious sword cry sounded, and the sword mountain buzzed. Flying swords flew out of the sword mountain, turned into streamers of light, and swept in the direction of the thatched hut like swallows returning to their nest. During this time, Thought Moon Immortal had been climbing the sword mountain. Although she had passed many tests of flying swords and obtained many flying swords, there were even more left on the sword mountain. Now, with a command from Kong Kong, tens of thousands of swords flew together. In front of the thatched hut, Kong Kong's figure suddenly expanded rapidly, turning into a phantom that was hundreds of feet tall. The streamers of light gathered from thousands of flying swords were held in his hand, as if he was holding a huge long sword. He glanced at Lu Yi for a moment, then laughed and recited, "All Dharma emptiness is emptiness, emptiness is emptiness, but emptiness is emptiness." The sword slashed down. The sky fell and the earth cracked. A huge crack appeared above Lu Yi and the others. At the same time, the hundreds of feet tall phantom also suddenly shrank. In front of the thatched hut, Kong Kong was still Kong Kong, but his figure had become extremely illusory and transparent. The huge long sword in his hand also collapsed, and many flying swords gathered and rotated like a huge dragon, wrapping Lu Yi and the others in it. Like a spiral, they drilled into the crack and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After Lu Yi and the others left, the space in this secret realm suddenly collapsed. Where the weapon forging workshop was, the fierce fire of the earth fiercely gushed out with the collapse. The tongues of fire engulfed everything in the secret realm, including Kong Kong's illusory figure sitting in front of the thatched hut. The flying swords gathered into a dragon, and drilled out of the huge crack in the space, and then all the way up, destroying everything in their path. The location of the entrance to the secret realm was unknown how many feet underground, and above it were solid rocks. But at this moment, under the stirring of the sword dragon, these rocks were not much different from tofu. Until a certain moment, the sword dragon broke through all the restraints, and the three of them saw the light of day again. It was also at this moment that the sword dragon suddenly collapsed, turning into thousands of streamers, and flew away in all directions. Thought Moon Immortal frowned, mainly because this movement was a bit too big, and it was very likely to attract the attention of nearby cultivators. Just as she was about to take Lu Yi and Ying Wuji and leave this place, a sudden surge of fire chased after them from below. Astonishingly, it was the fire of the earth from the secret realm. The fire swept out, and the void distorted. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji both felt a sense of impending doom. At this time it was already too late to escape. Thought Moon Immortal flashed in front of the two of them, and she circulated her spiritual power, fiercely slashing down with the willow catkin sword in her hand. Like a waterfall, the sword light directly split the soaring fire in half, and spread to the left and right. Only the three of them were not corroded by the fire. Thought Moon Immortal also circulated her spiritual power with all her might, protecting the two of them. Ying Wuji was moved to the extreme. At this time, if Thought Moon Immortal did not care about his life, even if he had 10 lives, it would not be enough. Even if he understood that he was only Lu Ye's collateral, he was still being protected. After more than 10 breaths of time, the flames that were spewing out from below gradually subsided. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji breathed a long sigh of relief. Thought Moon Immortal's expression was extremely solemn. She turned to Lu Yi and ordered, "Let's split up. You quietly sneak back to Mount Songyan." Saying so, she grabbed Ying Wuji by the collar. Under Ying Wuji's bewildered gaze, she directly flew into the air. Her spiritual power and the aura of a divine sea realm cultivator were not concealed in the slightest, as brilliant as the sun. Lu Ye's expression also changed. He hurriedly put the amber into his spirit beast pouch and fled in another direction. The reason Thought Moon Immortal did not take him was because she had already been exposed. That powerful sword strike just now had most likely alarmed the nearby divine sea realm cultivators. She was also quite famous in the Myriad Devil Ridge, and this place was the heart of the Myriad Devil Ridge. In this situation, once the divine sea realm cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge learned that she was here, they would definitely pursue her in all kinds of ways. In this kind of situation, if she still took Lu Yi with her, it would be extremely strange. Lu Ye's expression also changed. He hurriedly put the amber into his spirit beast pouch and fled in another direction. The reason Thought Moon Immortal did not take him was because she had already been exposed. That powerful sword strike just now had most likely alarmed the nearby divine sea realm cultivators. She was also quite famous in the Myriad Devil Ridge, and this place was the heart of the Myriad Devil Ridge. In this kind of situation, once the divine sea realm cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge learned that she was here, they would definitely pursue her in all kinds of ways. In this kind of situation, if she still took Lu Yi with her, it would be extremely unwise. Once Lu Yi was involved in the fight between the divine sea realm cultivators, he would most likely be in danger. This time was not like the last time when he fought against Wanzhong Gang. Last time there were only 3 divine sea realm cultivators on the other side. There were not many of them, and Lu Yi could still use his flight of the rainbow phoenixes. But this time there was no telling how many divine sea realm cultivators would be sent from the Myriad Devil Ridge. When Thought Moon Immortal left, she deliberately revealed her aura and power to attract the attention of the powerful cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge. This way it would be easier for Lu Yi to hide and escape. The reason why she took Ying Wuji with her was that she was afraid that without her, Ying Wuji would expose Lu Ye's identity. In this kind of situation, it was best for Lu Yi to act alone. Thought Moon Immortal did not know how Lu Yi had sneaked into the lonely mountain city. But if he could sneak into the Myriad Devil Ridge safely, it meant that Lu Yi had his own unique skills. Therefore, after realizing the current situation, she made a prompt decision to separate from Lu Yi. She had to worry about Lu Ye's life, but she could ignore Ying Wuji's life. If there were divine sea realm cultivators surrounding her, Ying Wuji might be of some use in her hands. No matter what, Ying Wuji was a core disciple of the Sanluo Hall of this generation. The Myriad Devil Ridge had to take care of the Sanluo Hall's reputation. Thought Moon Immortal had already left. Lu Yi did not dare to fly too far. After flying for 15 kilometers, he immediately landed and found a place to hide. He activated the aura concealment and concealment spiritual tattoos and quietly lay dormant. He felt a headache coming on. Emptiness had caused trouble. The method he used to send the three of them out of the sword instrument sect's secret realm was too grand. Not to mention that the flying swords would attract the attention of tens of thousands of myriad devil-rich cultivators. The collapse of the secret realm itself would also attract the attention of nearby cultivators. Coupled with the actions of Thought Moon Immortal, this area had probably attracted the attention of cultivators from all directions. That was indeed the case. Lu Yi soon felt the aura of a divine sea realm cultivator passing by not far away. He acted in a hurry, so he did not know if he was chasing after Thought Moon Immortal. A moment later, another sound of breaking through the air came from nearby. Obviously, the myriad devil-rich cultivators who had received the news had come to investigate. In the next half-day, the situation developed as Lu Yi had expected. A large number of myriad devil-rich cultivators gathered from all directions to investigate the cause of the strange changes here. Coupled with the disappearance of many ownerless flying swords, the myriad devil-rich cultivators' enthusiasm for treasure hunting was aroused. On the Li Plain it was very lively. There was no news from Thought Moon Immortal. Lu Yi did not know what the situation was, so he did not dare to disturb her. Asking Ing Wuji was an option, but after all, their positions were different. Even if he asked him, Lu Yi did not dare to believe the answer he received. He could only continue to wait. Chapter 929. Lu Yi originally wanted to wait for the commotion here to die down before leaving. However, the situation at Li Plains did not gradually die down. Instead, it became more and more lively. He could not hide anymore. It was not that he had been exposed. It was just that every day one more rich cultivators would pass by or over his head. There was no lack of divine sea realm cultivators among them. There were also cultivators who carefully searched every corner of Li Plains in order to find the flying swords that escaped from the mystic realm. There were several times when they almost found his location. In such a situation, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for Lu Yi to hide in one place. Once the Wanmo rich cultivators found his tracks, the situation would become very complicated. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi made a decision. Since he could not hide anymore, he might as well not hide anymore. In such a situation, it was better to act openly than sneaking around. However, before that, he had to disguise himself a little. First of all, his original appearance and identity would definitely not work. Lu Ye's name was like thunder in Wanmo Ridge. Even many divine sea realm cultivators saw him as a thorn in their side. Once exposed, his situation would not be any better than Thought Moon Immortal's. He could not use the identity of Fierce Neo. He had once entered Lonely Mountain City as Fierce Neo. At that time, many Wanmo Ridge cultivators had seen him, and Ing Wuji also knew his identity. In this way, he could only change to another identity. After thinking about it, Lu Yi activated his spirit power and changed the color of the Scarlet Dragon battlesuit, turning it white. Then he rummaged through his storage space and quickly found a mirror-like spirit weapon. The quality of this spirit weapon was not high. It was about the level of a high-grade spirit weapon. It was a defensive spirit weapon that could block and counter some spell attacks. For Lu Yi, it was not very useful. Other than that, it could indeed be used as a mirror. Facing the mirror, Lu Yejia moved her fingers to the right of the D-Wei leaf. Among the 7 new spiritual tattoos that she had obtained previously, other than the Binglian lotus leaf, which she could not figure out the effects of, she had tried all the other spiritual tattoos. The Thousand-Face Spirit Tattoo was a spirit tattoo that could change one's appearance. It was undoubtedly very useful, especially for the current Lu Yi. It was simply a divine skill. The appearance changed by the Thousand-Face Spirit Tattoos was not just an illusion. Instead, it was a disguise by twisting the flesh and blood of the face. In other words, this change was real and not some kind of illusion. Reflected in the mirror, Lu Yi constructed the 1,000 faces on his face and controlled the power of the spirit tattoos to change the distribution of flesh and blood on his face. A moment later, a handsome face appeared in the mirror. He opened up a little distance. The person in the mirror had a jade-like face, eyes like bright stars and eyebrows like ink painting. His posture was tall and straight, and complemented by his white robes, he really gave off an ethereal feeling. Wasn't he a little too handsome? Lu Yi frowned. Forget it, so be it. Anyway, it was just a new identity and he couldn't be bothered with it. After putting away the mountain plate saber, he took out a long sword from his storage space and attached it to his waist. A young and handsome sword cultivator was born. In the sword instrument sect's secret realm, he had once told Kong Kong that he was a sword cultivator. Wuxia almost laughed out loud. However, strictly speaking, he wasn't lying. In the imprint of the dragon soaring realm's origin, he had met many sword cultivators. Lu Ye's mind was attached to them, and he cultivated and grew with them. Now, his attainments in the sword Dao were even better than his saber skills. It was only because his saber skills were the most suitable for him that Lu Yi did not abandon his saber for a sword. Only the most suitable for himself could reach a higher position. Otherwise, he would only be learning from others and would never be able to surpass his predecessors. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi took out the sword gourd that Kong Kong had given him and hung it on his waist. Fourth senior brother had the same appearance, but in comparison, the sword gourd was smaller, and fourth senior brother's was much bigger. With a new disguise, Lu Yi walked out of his hiding place and flew into the sky. Along the way, he encountered many groups of myriad demons rich cultivators, but they did not have any interactions with each other. These myriad demons rich cultivators probably did not expect that there would be a Grand Heaven Alliance cultivator in this world, who would be so bold as to act so openly in the hinterland of the enemy camp. This was the so-called darkness under the lamp. Of course, the main reason was that Lu Yi had nothing to fear. Even if he really encountered any interrogation or questioning, he would have a way to deal with it. As long as he could get out of the Li Plains and leave this crowded place, he could sneak back to the Vicissitude Flame Mountain Pass. Along the way, there were no surprises. Just as Lu Yi felt that this was going smoothly, a group of people suddenly came from the front. Before they got close, Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. This was because he felt a divine thought sweep past him. He looked up and saw that the leader was a woman in her early 30s. She was dressed in a palace robe and had an exquisite figure. She was very beautiful. What caught Lu Ye's attention was not her beauty and figure, but her cultivation level. This woman was a divine sea realm cultivator. Even though he met some people previously, they were not in the divine sea realm, so Lu Yi did not feel any pressure. Now that he met a divine sea realm cultivator, Lu Yi was not sure if she could see through his disguise. However, using the Thousand Faces rune to change his appearance was a deliberate decision. Doing so was at least more reliable than wearing a mask. Under the current situation, if he still wore a mask, he would appear sneaky and attract attention. There was even a group of true Lake Realm cultivators following behind this woman. They were searching everywhere. It seemed like they were either looking for traces of the Thought Moon Immortal or those flying swords. As they faced each other, Lu Yi hurriedly moved to the side and lowered his head. He was prepared to leave after this group of people left. He could clearly feel that the woman's gaze stopped on his face for a moment, but she quickly moved away. They walked past each other. Just as Lu Yi let out a long sigh of relief, he heard a delicate voice from the group of cultivators, "Martial uncle, this person is alone. If he accidentally bumps into that poisonous woman, won't he be dead for sure? I heard that vicious woman killed many people this time. Why don't we bring him along? Why do you care about him? In this situation, he still dares to be alone. It's either greed or arrogance. Even if he dies, he deserves it." Another voice sounded. "But he's still from the Myriad Devil Ridge. I think you can't bear to see him die because he's so handsome, right?" That person snorted. "I didn't say that. Don't talk nonsense." The woman who spoke earlier blushed. As the two spoke, the woman stopped and said, "Indeed, he's still from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Since we've met, let's bring him along. I'll talk to him." The woman's voice sounded again. Not far away, Lu Yi was having a headache. He never thought that he would be in trouble even if he made himself handsome. If he had known, he would have made himself look more ordinary. When he looked up, He saw a female cultivator flying towards him. Her figure wasn't plump, but her chest was heavy. It could be said that she was like a fruit hanging from a thin branch. She immediately attracted Lu Ye's attention. As if she sensed Lu Ye's gaze, the woman's face blushed slightly. She stopped 3 feet away from Lu Ye and curtsied, "Greetings, junior brother." Her cultivation was at the 7th order True Lake realm, much higher than Lu Ye. She was also older, so it wasn't a problem for her to call Lu Ye junior brother. "Senior sister, what's the matter?" Lu Ye returned the greeting. "My martial uncle wants to talk to you." When the woman spoke, she gestured to a place not far away. Lu Ye knew what she wanted to do and wanted to refuse. But when he looked up and saw the gaze of the Spirit Sea Realm cultivator, he could only agree helplessly, "Okay." Following the woman to the Spirit Sea Realm cultivator, Lu Ye bowed, "Greetings, senior." The Spirit Sea Realm woman frowned. "Which sect are you from? And which mountain pass are you from? Don't you know that the Grand Heaven Alliance is in chaos right now? It's extremely dangerous. How dare you act alone?" Lu Ye immediately put on a look of shock. A Spirit Sea Realm cultivator is in chaos? Junior doesn't know. Junior only heard that there are many opportunities appearing here, so Junior wanted to try his luck. There was nothing wrong with this excuse. After all, there were indeed many flying swords flying out of the sword instrument sect's secret realm. During the 2 days that Lu Ye had been hiding in the dark, he had also seen some myriad Devil Ridge cultivators searching around. The Spirit Sea Realm woman frowned even more. "How can you not know?" The transmission of news in the 9 continents was extremely fast and convenient. As long as this young man was a Wanemo Ridge cultivator, there was no way he wouldn't know about the recent news. This made her a little suspicious. Lu Ye had already thought of an excuse, so he said, "Reporting to Senior, Junior is from the Wuxia continent. I only recently arrived in the 9 continents, so I'm not familiar with the situation here." "You're from the Wuxia continent?" A group of people looked at him curiously. Many cultivators from the Wuxia continent had appeared in the 9 continents after the fusion of the Cloudy River battlefield. This was not a secret, and most cultivators had already heard about it. However, the 9 continents was vast, and the cultivators from the Wuxia continent were scattered all over the 9 continents, so it was difficult for ordinary people to see one. This was also the reason why Lu Ye claimed to be from the Wuxia continent, which surprised everyone. After all, he was a cultivator from another world, and they wanted to see how different he was from the 9 continents. "That's right." Lu Ye nodded. "Previously, Junior joined the Wanemo Ridge camp, but I haven't joined the State Guard yet. Senior should know some things about the Wuxia continent. Compared to the 9 continents, the 9 continents is vast. Junior wants to walk around and see more before joining the State Guard to serve the Wanemo Ridge. Previously, I passed by this place and heard that there are many opportunities here, so I came to try my luck. Junior is a sword cultivator, so I can't help but yearn for things like flying swords." "I see." The Spirit Sea Realm woman nodded, but it was unknown if she believed him. However, Lu Ye's words were watertight, and there wasn't much of a flaw. "Now you know, not only are there opportunities here, there are also dangers. There's a vicious woman from the Hautian Alliance, and her cultivation is very high. Recently, she's been killing people all over the Li Plains. You should come with us." "With Martial Uncle looking after you, it's safer than being alone," the woman who led Lu Ye said. Chapter 930. Poisonous Woman. Lu Ye's eyes twitched slightly. He didn't know what Missing Moon Immortal would think after hearing this evaluation. Yet, she was actually going on a killing spree everywhere. Clearly, she was drawing the attention of the myriad demons rich for him so that he could escape. Otherwise, with her ability, there was no need to make such a big movement. Even if she was blocked by the powerhouses of the myriad Devil Ridge and couldn't leave for a while, she could hide in peace. After all, she was a ghost cultivator. But she did this. Lu Ye probably understood Missing Moon Immortal's intention. The Spirit Sea Realm woman showed a look of realization. If the person in front of her was from the Wuxia continent, Then it was understandable that he didn't know the situation in Li Yuan. The transmission of information between the cultivators of 9 regions was convenient and fast, but he was a cultivator of the Wuxia continent who had just arrived in 9 regions. How could he obtain information? After looking up and down at Lu Yi, the woman nodded. If you want, you can go with the team. Even if you meet that poisonous woman, I can protect you. If you don't want to, you can leave on your own. Since the other party had already put it this way, what else could Lu Yi say? Naturally, he revealed a grateful expression. Many thanks to Senior for taking care of me. Junior will have to trouble you then. He felt strange that the other party didn't mean to verify his camp. He was ready to show his Myriad Devil Ridge battlefield mark. The woman nodded slightly and led the way without saying anything. The others followed closely. There were not many people in the team. Except for Lu Yi, there were only 5 people, 3 men and 2 women. All of them had good cultivation and were all at the True Lake realm. The others were indifferent to Lu Yi, but the female cultivator who led Lu Yi here was very warm to him. During the conversation, Lu Yi learned that the female cultivator's name was Tong Shuyao. Their team came from the Dark Moon Forest Pass of the Myriad Devil Ridge defense line. Previously, they learned that missing Moon Immortal had appeared in Li Yuan, so they came to search for her. However, after searching for more than a day, not to mention missing Moon Immortal, they didn't even see a flying sword. Tong Shuyao asked Lu Yi a lot of things about the Wuxia continent. Lu Yi naturally answered her questions clearly and logically. After all, he had stayed in the Wuxia continent for a while, and was the senior brother of the vanguard team that saved the Wuxia continent. No one in 9 regions knew the situation of the Wuxia continent better than him. The Divine Sea Realm cultivator in front of him listened quietly. Although she did not expect Lu Ye's real identity to be a cultivator from the Grand Heaven Alliance, she did not believe Lu Ye's one-sided story. Until now, she was finally sure that Lu Yi was indeed a cultivator from the Wuxia continent. If they were not from the Wuxia continent, it was impossible for them to know so much about the Wuxia continent. Even she, who was at the Spirit Sea realm, only knew about the Wuxia continent from hearsay. By the way, after talking so much, I still haven't asked for Junior Marshal Brother's name. Tong Shuyao's face was red. She was flying very close to Lu Yi, and they would bump into each other from time to time. Lu Yi tried to dodge but failed. My name is Li Taibai. Lu Yi casually mentioned a name that was deep in his memory. Li Taibai. Tong Shuyao savored the name and smiled. Nice. Along the way, they would meet other teams that were searching for the Thought Moon Immortal. Many of the teams were led by Spirit Sea Realm cultivators, and were accompanied by many True Lake Realm cultivators. Seeing this, Lu Yi was secretly worried. The Myriad Devil Ridge was clearly enraged. They had already set up an inescapable net on the Li Plains, and were determined to exterminate the Thought Moon Immortal. Previously, Lu Yi did not dare to casually send a message to the Thought Moon Immortal for fear of disturbing her. Now that he was under the nose of a Divine Sea Realm cultivator from the Myriad Devil Ridge, he did not dare to do anything. At night, the team set up camp in the wilderness. It could be seen that the few True Lake Realm cultivators in the team were all well trained. They had a clear division of labor. Some set up tents, some set up arrays, and some were on guard. Lu Yi sat in front of a bonfire. He was roasting a piece of beast meat as he chatted with Tong Shuyao helplessly. This woman was quite clingy. He did not know what she saw in him. Ever since they met during the day, they had been inseparable. Lu Yi regretted making himself so handsome. Yaoer, come in. Suddenly, the Divine Sea Realm woman's voice came from the tent. Tong Shuyao responded crisply and immediately went in. However, before Lu Yi could breathe a sigh of relief, a figure appeared in front of him. The figure stared at him fiercely and said in a low voice, "Kid, if you know what's good for you, stay away from Junior Marshal's sister Yao. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die a horrible death." Lu Yi felt quite helpless. During the day, he felt this person's hostility towards him. He roughly understood what was going on. However, his current identity was Li Taibai of the Unparalleled Continent. He was living under someone else's roof. It was not convenient for him to do anything unnecessary. Moreover, it was the woman who initiated it. What did it have to do with him? Rebirth. the great age of waves. Just as Lu Yi was about to casually reply, he suddenly felt a great sense of danger. He looked up abruptly. Under the night sky, a figure stood in the air. A full moon hung behind her. From the figure, it was a woman. She looked similar to the Thought Moon Immortal. However, she was wearing a mask on her face. Her true appearance could not be seen clearly. She appeared like a ghost. It was as if she had been standing there from the beginning. As a terrifying pressure filled the air, streaks of sword chi slashed down from the sky. Lu Yi suddenly stood up. He raised his hand and summoned the long sword at his waist. As the sword danced, many mysterious lines quickly formed on the long sword. Moon returning. Asterisk chi chi chi. Asterisk. When the sound of something breaking through the air came, the other true Lake Realm cultivators reacted. They hurriedly urged their own methods to resist. However, there were still screams and exclamations. Who is it? In the tent, another figure flew into a rage. Wrapped in boundless murderous intent, she rushed towards the enemy in the air. During the day, this Spirit Sea Realm woman did not reveal her full cultivation. Lu Yi did not know how strong she was. Now that she was furious, her cultivation was clearly visible. She was a 6th order Spirit Sea Realm cultivator. This kind of cultivation was not weak in the entire 9 provinces. The woman was a spirit cultivator. The woman was a sword cultivator. The two figures immediately engaged in a fight. Tong Shuyao also ran out of the tattered tent. She looked up and shouted, "Help!" As she spoke, she immediately flew towards the battle. Lu Yi was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. He was already injured in the previous round of attacks. Looking at the attacking woman, he was a little confused. When he first saw this woman, he thought it was Thought Moon Immortal. However, at this moment he was sure that it was not Thought Moon Immortal. She was just imitating her sword cultivator methods. After all, he had been with Thought Moon Immortal for a long time. Not to mention anything else, he was very familiar with Thought Moon Immortal's figure and smell. Therefore, he could tell the difference at a glance. Most importantly, Thought Moon Immortal's cultivation was higher than this person's. Who was this person? Why did she do this? Lu Ye's first thought was that she was from Grand Heaven Alliance. However, if she was really from Grand Heaven Alliance, why did she have to use Thought Moon Immortal's methods? Moreover, Grand Heaven Alliance's Spirit Sea Realm cultivators would not come to this place for no reason. This was the hinterland of Myriad Demons Ridge. Even Thought Moon Immortal came here secretly. No one would be foolish enough to barge in openly and cause trouble at this time. However, if she was not from Grand Heaven Alliance, the situation would be complicated. Fortunately, it was not Thought Moon Immortal. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. Although it was just a casual attack, it was not something that a true Lake Realm cultivator like him could withstand. The lunar reversal spirit pattern was indeed useful. The Scarlet Dragon combat suit was also of great help. He looked around. Apart from the people who entered the tent just now, everyone in the team was not weak in the entire 9 prefectures. The woman was a spell cultivator, while the woman was a sword cultivator. The two figures immediately got into a fight. Tong Shuyao also ran out from the tattered tent. She looked up and shouted, "Help!" As she spoke, she immediately flew towards the battle. Blood flowed out from the corner of Lu Ye's mouth. He was already injured in the previous round of attacks. Looking at the figure of the attacking woman, he was confused. When he first saw this woman, he thought it was Thought Moon Immortal. However, he was sure that it was not Thought Moon Immortal. She was just imitating her sword cultivator methods. After all, he had been with Thought Moon Immortal for a long time. Not to mention anything else, he was very familiar with Thought Moon Immortal's figure and smell. Therefore, he could tell the difference at a glance. Most importantly, Thought Moon Immortal's cultivation was higher than this person. Who was this person? Why did she do this? Lu Ye's first reaction was that she was from Grand Heaven Alliance. However, if she was really from Grand Heaven Alliance, why did she have to use Thought Moon Immortal's method? Moreover, Grand Heaven Alliance's Divine Sea Realm cultivators would not come to this place for no reason. This was the hinterland of Myriad Devil Ridge. Even Thought Moon Immortal came here secretly. No one would be stupid enough to barge in openly and cause trouble at this time. However, if she was not from Grand Heaven Alliance, the situation would be complicated. Fortunately, it was not thought moon immortal. Otherwise, he would have been doomed. Although it was just a casual attack, it was not something that a true Lake Realm cultivator like him could withstand. The lunar reversal spirit pattern did play a role. The Scarlet Dragon battle clothes also helped a lot. Looking around, apart from Tong Shuyao who entered the tent just now, the rest of the true Lake Realm cultivators were all dead. This was especially true for the guy who had warned Lu Yi to stay away from Tong Shuyao, or else he would die a horrible death. His death was especially miserable. His eyes were still open, and there was a hole in his chest that was bleeding profusely. In such a situation, Lu Yi could not just stand by and watch. He could only pick up his sword and charge forward. It was not a big problem for him to hold the fort. At the very least, he could distract one of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators. If the Divine Sea Realm cultivators showed signs of weakness, they would have to face the threat of death. In such a situation, Lu Yi could not just sit by and watch the tigers fight. Otherwise, if the Divine Sea Realm cultivators on his side were defeated, he and Tong Shuyao would definitely die. When the sword radiance shone brightly, he had already leaped into the air. The flying sword in his hand turned into a stream of light and slashed towards the enemy at an extremely fast speed. Tong Shuyao also activated a spiritual weapon that looked like a long whip in her hand and whipped out many whip shadows. Although the two of them couldn't be of much help, it was better than doing nothing. Fortunately, although the enemy's cultivation was strong, it was not as strong as Tong Shuyao's martial uncle. He did not want to be entangled. After a while, he turned into a stream of sword radiance and flew away. The woman did not chase after him. Her expression was solemn and her face was slightly pale. She was undoubtedly at a disadvantage in the short exchange of blows just now. Lu Yi and Tong Shuyao also looked as if they had just escaped death. A sound of something breaking through the air came from afar and arrived in the blink of an eye. A middle-aged man appeared. The fluctuation of spiritual power on his body showed that he was a Divine Sea Realm cultivator. Apparently, he had sensed the disturbance here and came to investigate. Thought moon immortal? He looked at the woman. Doesn't look like it. The woman shook her head. She knew that if she had encountered Thought moon immortal, she would have suffered more than just a small loss. She would have been seriously injured at the moment. Then who could it be? The middle-aged man frowned. I don't know. Someone is fishing in troubled waters. The woman gritted her teeth. What a bastard! The middle-aged man was furious. At this critical moment when everyone in Wanemo Ridge was united to encircle and annihilate Thought moon immortal, someone actually did such a thing secretly. He was furious. I need an explanation for this. The woman looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man nodded. Don't worry. If someone really takes advantage of this time to cause trouble, I will not let them off easily. You are already injured. Go back and recuperate. Don't interfere in Li Yuan's matters. The woman nodded. The middle-aged man did not stay and left quickly. The woman looked around with a gloomy expression. Clean up. Tong Shuyao agreed with red eyes. She then said to Lu Yi, Junior Marshal Brother Tai Bai, help me. Okay. Lu Yi nodded. He had no qualms about collecting the corpses of Wanemo Ridge cultivators. However, judging from the situation just now, Wanemo Ridge was obviously not as united as a rock. But then again, where there were people, there would be disputes. Wanemo Ridge was like this, so was Haotian Alliance. Click to download the app of this site. You can read it for free. Chapter 931. After packing everything up, Lu Yi and Tong Shuyao flew in a certain direction under the guidance of the Spirit Sea Realm woman. Perhaps because of the death, Tong Shuyao was not even in the mood to talk to Lu Yi and remained silent the whole way. Lu Yi was happy. Although he didn't know who the sword cultivator who attacked before was, he could tell that he must have a personal grudge with Tong Shuyao, his martial aunt at the Spirit Sea Realm. Now that Li Plains was in chaos, he must have taken the opportunity to secretly take revenge. I heard that the Peerless Continent has 4 sealed realms. Except for one occupied by the corpse race, the other three are occupied by the human race. Which sealed realm do you come from? The woman suddenly asked. Lu Yi was stunned. I heard that the peerless continent has 4 sealed realms. Except for one occupied by the corpse race, the other 3 are occupied by the human race. Which sealed realm do you come from? The woman suddenly asked. Lu Yi was stunned. Because during the day, the woman obviously didn't have much interest in him and didn't ask him anything. Now that she suddenly asked about his origin, it was obviously because of Lu Ye's performance in the battle just now. Her subordinates were all at the True Lake realm, and their cultivations were all higher than Lu Ye's. When they were attacked, except for Tong Shuyao who was in the same tent as her, everyone else died. Only Lu Yi, who had the lowest cultivation, survived. After that, Lu Yi and Tong Shuyao helped to hold the fort and performed very well. Only Lu Yi, who had the lowest cultivation, survived. After that, Lu Yi and Tong Shuyao helped to hold the fort and performed very well. These 2 points alone were enough for the woman to see some of Lu Ye's depths. Replying to Senior, Junior is a rogue cultivator, not a person from the sealed realm, Lu Yi said casually. The cultivators in the sealed realm were all documented. If this woman checked his identity, he would definitely be exposed. Rogue cultivators were different. The environment of the peerless continent was special. Besides the sealed realms, there were only small strongholds. The cultivators in these strongholds could be considered rogue cultivators. They didn't have much interaction with each other, so as long as Lu Yi insisted that he was a rogue cultivator, no one could find out anything. A rogue cultivator? The woman was surprised. The cultivators of the peerless continent have not been in the 9 continents for long. As far as I know, there was no True Lake Realm cultivator there, but you are already a 3rd-order True Lake Realm cultivator. Before, the woman didn't care about a stranger like Lu Yi, so she didn't think too much about it. But now, it seemed that there was something wrong with Lu Ye's cultivation. It wasn't that he was suspicious of anything, but this matter was indeed strange. This young man called Li Taibai's cultivation speed was too fast. Previously, I encountered a fated opportunity, Lu Yi said casually. Also, it can be said that I have accumulated a lot of power. Senior, you said that there is no true lake in the Wuxia continent. Thus, I was able to accumulate more power in the Cloud River tier. The woman nodded slightly, agreeing with Lu Ye's statement. He couldn't help but have a thought in his heart. If the cultivators of the Wuxia continent were like Li Taibai and were able to accumulate strength, then wouldn't there be many experts in the future? If that was the case, he could think of a way to take in more cultivators from the Wuxia continent. As the thought flashed through her mind, she spoke again. You people from the Wuxia continent should not be very familiar with the situation in the 9 regions. Why did you choose the Wanemo Ridge and not the Haotian Alliance? Lu Yi laughed, looking a little embarrassed. He raised his hand and scratched his head. Actually, I didn't think too much about it. I just randomly chose one. Most of the cultivators from the Wuxia continent chose so casually. Seeing his silly look, Tong Shuyao, who was at the side with a heavy heart, couldn't help but laugh. Her mood was also much better. She said sweetly, then you made the right choice. The people from the Haotian Alliance are all bad people. Do you have any thoughts of joining the state guards of the Wanemo Ridge? The woman asked. Lu Yi didn't have such thoughts. If he hadn't met them on this trip, he would have already run out of Li Plains and sneaked towards the vicissitude Flame Mountain Pass. Now that a divine ocean tier cultivator from the Wanemo Ridge was beside him, it made him feel like he was sitting on pins and needles. He said, Senior, please forgive me. I haven't been in the 9 regions for long, so I don't have any thoughts of joining the state guards. Before he finished speaking, Lu Yi felt the woman's gaze become sharp, and the pressure was as heavy as a mountain. Why? Are you waiting for the right price? See which side is stronger between the Wanemo Ridge and the Haotian Alliance before you make your decision? I don't dare. Lu Yi hurriedly put on a fearful look. Since you don't dare, then make a decision early. The woman snorted. Only when you make a decision will you have a place to belong. Otherwise, my Wanemo Ridge isn't a place where anyone can come and go as they please. Lu Yi frowned secretly. What's going on? Judging from the meaning of this woman's words, it seemed like she wanted to force him to join the state guards of the Wanemo Ridge. Did his performance just now catch her eye? It should be. She probably wanted to recruit him, otherwise there was no reason for her to suddenly change her attitude. Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. I will consider it carefully, Lu Yi replied. The woman no longer paid any attention to him and continued flying forward. At dawn, a big city came into view. Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling, so he asked, that city in front is? It's the Wanemo city, Tong Shuyao replied. It's our Wanemo city. The Wanemo Ridge is at the center of the military province. It was equivalent to the Haotian Alliance's Haotian city. Lu Yi cursed inwardly. He remembered that when he entered Haotian city for the first time, a restriction in the city swept across his body and activated the battlefield imprint on the back of his hand. That restriction obviously had the function of identifying the camp, so even if there was no one guarding around the Haotian Alliance, there was no need to worry about Wanemo Ridge cultivators sneaking in. Just the restriction alone was enough. Moreover, there were many Divine Sea Realm cultivators in Haotian City. Who would dare to court death? If Haotian City had such a restriction, how could Wanemo City not have one? Although Lu Yi had a battlefield imprint of Wanemo Ridge on his body, this imprint was not the same as an orthodox imprint. It was temporary because once activated, it could only last for 4 hours. He did not know if his temporary imprint could avoid the monitoring of Wanemo Ridge's restriction. Even if it could, what would happen when the imprint lost its effect after 4 hours? This Wanemo City could not be entered. Just as he was thinking about this, the woman spoke first. Before you make a decision, follow me. Tell me when you've made a decision. Lu Ye's heart sank. She had really taken a fancy to him. Otherwise, why would she be so eager to tie him to her belt? These two women were really detestable. The younger one took a fancy to his body, and the older one was even more outrageous. She wanted both his body and mind. As the distance between them slowly approached, Lu Ye's heart sank. The woman took the lead and rushed into Wanemo City, followed by Lu Yi and Tong Shuyao. The moment they rushed into Wanemo City, Lu Yi activated his Wanemo Ridge battlefield imprint. He could clearly feel an invisible force sweeping across his body. At the same time, a red light appeared on the back of his hand. Lu Yi was relieved. He had passed this hurdle. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.